On the street. Yes, I'm a hunter, but... forgive me. This way, please. I'll guide you. All right. Sensing this would get messy, if he said, "There's been a misunderstanding," Jinwoo decided to follow the soldier for now. He scanned the area. The streets were deserted. Only soldiers and police remained. Monster corpses lay scattered among cracked buildings and smashed cars. A gate must have opened nearby. It didn't happen often anymore, but a gate could still appear in some remote spot and go unnoticed. When that happened, nearby military units were dispatched to buy time until hunters arrived. Guns didn't work on monsters. The soldiers' job was to help evacuate civilians and hold the line, cannon fodder, whether they liked it or not. "Thank you," the soldier ahead said suddenly. Because hunters like you fight, we get to go home at the end of the day." "Oh, I should be the one thanking you," Jinwoo thought. Soldiers thanking hunters. Hunters thanking soldiers. People protecting people. A beep crackled over the radio. The soldier brightened. They've cleared most of the monsters. Only the big ones left. Jinwoo didn't need the update. He could feel it. A dense, heavy presence nearby, surrounded by several weaker auras. His heightened perception fed him the shape of the situation. That's the boss. They reached an open plaza where a dozen hunters encircled a towering stone giant, as tall as a telephone pole. A golem. The soldier gasped and staggered back. Seeing one on a screen and seeing one in person were worlds apart. Jinwoo watched, steady. "Healers, focus on the tanker." "We're trying. Why isn't it dying?" "The damage dealers. Put out more. The thing's defense is insane. And we're short on mages. They've been summoned in a hurry. No high rankers." Their attacks barely scratched the golem, and the fight dragged on. Boom! The golem's fist slammed down. The tanker buckled to one knee. Cook! Blood sprayed. "The tanker's going to die. What do you want me to do? I'm out of mana." "Where's high-rank support?" They were at their limit. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. "If that's all it is, I can handle it." He slipped back a few steps. The golem's defense was high, but its aura wasn't on the level of the poison-fanged blue he'd faced in the instant dungeon. Break the shell. In it in one hit. He shifted his stance, raising his broken sword like a javelin. Muscles bunched along his arm. Veins stood out on the back of his hand. He poured every ounce of strength into his right arm. He drew back like a bowstring, then released. Go! From the tanker's view, Lee Han-soo, a D-rank tanker, was fading. His shield was cracking. Healing spells thinned to a trickle. If this continued, they'd all die here. He made up his mind. I'll buy time. The others run. Later, stronger hunters can finish it. Leave this to me. Something flashed across his vision. Too fast to see, only the cold sense of movement in the night. Kwahong. The golem's head exploded. What? Lee Han-soo stared, stunned. The headless giant swayed. The hunters roared and surged. It's working. It's going down. Keep hitting it. None of them seemed to have noticed the projectile. They were too focused on the kill. Only Lee Han-soo, standing right in front, had seen the blur. Roar. The golem toppled. Thud. Dust billowed. Cheers erupted. We did it. We killed it. Lee Han-soo shook his head. No, our attacks didn't do that. He ran around the fallen giant, searching. Near the rubble of its skull, he found half a shattered blade. A cheap steel sword, faint traces of magic clinging to it. Someone threw this and blew the head off a boss that shrugged off 10 hunters? He looked up, eyes wide, then sprinted toward the direction it must have come from. Excuse me. A soldier nearby jumped. And me? You. Did you throw this? Oh, that? Actually, the soldier turned to look behind him and blinked. Huh. There was a hunter standing right here a second ago. No one now. Lee Han-soo scratched his neck and stared at the broken sword. That power, a high-rank hunter? Whoever it was had already vanished. Quiet exit. By then, Jinwoo was already heading home. He turned away the moment the golem started to fall. He knew he'd killed it. Technically, the loot should go to the hunter who landed the finishing blow. He could have claimed the golem, but how would he prove an E-rank killed it from range with a broken blade? The sword and the soldier wouldn't convince anyone. and claiming credit would mean questions, dangerous ones. He couldn't risk exposing the truth, the one ability in the world that let him level up. He wouldn't trade that secret for a single golem spoils. A waste, but necessary. Not that he walked away empty-handed. Level up. The message chimed the instant the golem fell. So I can gain levels from monsters in normal dungeons too. That knowledge alone was worth more than any crystal. Home. His apartment sat on the 8th floor of an aging building at the edge of the city. He let himself in. Darkness. Gina is still studying. His sister was probably at the library. On the table sat a bowl of rice and soup with a note in her neat, playful handwriting. Don't skip dinner. I'm checking later. He smiled and set the food aside. One thing to check first. Status window. Name, Song Jin-woo. Level, 18. Class, none. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP, 2,220. MP, 350. Tiredness, 2. Stats, Strength, 48. Stamina, 27. Agility, 27. Intelligence, 27. Perception, 27. Available points, 0. Skills. Passive. Unknown, LV max. Tenacity, LV1. Active, -LV1. A long day. Level 18 now. Strength nearing 50. The other stats climbing. Agility and perception finally made sense in practice. A good dagger with solid options. A pile of gold he hadn't even used yet. The special medicine. Even ignoring the potion, the instant dungeon had been a complete success. Dawn. Before sunrise. Anyone leaving the house moved carefully to avoid waking family. Gina eased the front door closed, ready to head to school. You heading out now? She spun around. Jin-woo jogged up the hall in a hoodie and sneakers, breath easy, looking like he'd already been out for a run. Appa, you're awake? Been up for a while. Go on, have a good day. Watch the road. Okay. She watched him slip back inside, tilting her head. Weird. He woke up before me. He wasn't lazy, but she was always the first one up. Today felt different. And his back looked broader. No way. Bodies don't change in a few days. She shook it off and headed out. Probably her imagination. Just as Gina shook her head, Jin-woo held out an umbrella. Why an umbrella? She took it and glanced at the sky. It was still before dawn, dark and mostly clear. But it doesn't look like it'll rain. Take it anyway. But it's heavy. It's a folding umbrella. It barely weighs anything. Quit exaggerating. Slam. The door shut. TCH. Does whatever he wants, she muttered, giving the door a couple of light kicks. She folded the umbrella, stuffed it into the empty pocket of her school bag, and turned to go. Wait. She froze, thinking back to the way she'd been looking up at him. Something was off. He definitely seemed taller than before. Do guys keep growing in their 20s? No way. She shook it off and hurried to school. Click. Jin-woo locked the door and summoned his inventory. Storage. Storage. Inventory. He learned it didn't matter what word he used as long as it meant the same thing. Same for the mailbox. Anything that meant open worked. He slipped the umbrella he'd pulled from a random box into the invisible space. No luck today either. It had been 4 days since he cleared the instant dungeon. Every day, he opened a random box hoping for another key. Nothing. Must be a rare drop. Anyway, he sat on the edge of his bed. Time to decide. Stats. Stats. Strength, 48. Stamina, 27. Agility, 27. Intelligence, 27. Perception, 27. Points available, 12. He'd been stacking points from his daily quests, always clearing them, always collecting rewards, just not spending yet. The problem was choosing. Strength, no regrets there. It had carried him so far. Agility, also great. Against weak foes it barely mattered, but as enemies got faster and fiercer, he'd rely on it more. Stamina and perception, both clearly useful. One kept him standing, the other kept him aware. Intelligence, the odd one out. His level climbed, but he didn't feel smarter, remember better, or calculate faster. It's probably tied to magic. Not urgent for now. So that left strength, agility, stamina, perception, and still a headache. Strength and agility worked in tandem. Big damage meant nothing if you couldn't land the hit. Perfect accuracy meant nothing if the hit didn't hurt. They were set. My strength is already high. Raise agility to match it. If he did that, stamina could wait. Agility lowered the chance of getting hit. Stamina paid off only after he did get hit. Investing in both at once wasn't efficient. Just keep a baseline in stamina and focus on speed. He settled on priorities, agility first, perception second, stamina third. Strength could sit for now. Then he put 2 points into strength. Tiering. Strength, 50. Points left, 10. He wanted the clean, round number. Human nature. Next, 8 points into agility. Agility, 35. Points left, 2. Also human nature. Multiples of 5 look nice. The last 2 went into perception. Perception, 29. Points left, 0. Shame he couldn't hit an even 30, but fine. Stamina and the rest could climb with levels. That was that. Not perfect, but good enough. The phone rang in the living room. Rang. The association? He used to dodge those calls. Not today. He wanted to test himself. He grabbed a receiver. Hunter, Song, Jin Woo. Eggy, you finally picked up. Not the association. He sighed. Learner Jin Woo, why are you so hard to reach lately? For years since high school. Yet the landlord still called him Learner. She'd taken the Song siblings in when they were kids. Sorry, I was in the hospital a few days ago. Tisk TSK. I figured. And, Learner Jin Woo, this month's rent hasn't come in yet. If it's hard, I could delay a month or 2. Oh no, it's okay. I'll send it shortly. Don't push yourself. You're caring for your mother and sister. Money matters, but take care of your health too. Thank you. I will. The call ended. He pulled his bank book from a drawer. Balance, around 800,000 won. Phew, rent was 500,000. That left 300,000 for the month. Cheap only because the place was old, far out, and the landlord kept the price low out of kindness. Finding 500K rent these days was unheard of. Living on 300K was harder. I need cash fast. Hunters earn money by killing monsters. The top Esena ranks had sponsors and ads, TV appearances, chable money. But there were too few of them. Everyone else lived in dungeons. Higher rank, greater pay, earned by your own ability. For an E rank like him, association only, no experience above C rank dungeons a rough spot. If I could just join an assault team. He checked job boards, made calls. No luck. Freelancers were picky. They were responsible for their own lives. Too strong for the association, not strong enough for big guilds, stuck between. Even so, they could still make over 10 million a month. High risk, high reward. No wonder the public envy hunters. Should I take the reassignment test and jump ranks now? He shook his head. Terrible idea. An E rank suddenly becoming high rank. A, B, even C would be a headline. People love gossip, and hunters were premium gossip. Attention meant eyes, and eyes meant questions. A hunter whose stats kept rising, getting stronger over time. Who is he? How? Can we copy him? Interest would come from those who wanted to use him and those who wanted to erase him. If even one of them had real power, a chill ran down his spine. He was still too weak. Until he could protect himself, he'd stay off the radar. No reassignment test. But I still need money. A part-time job wouldn't work. The association could call anytime. Dungeons gave both money and experience. He couldn't trade that for pocket change at a corner store. Then a bulletin post caught his eye. Emergency. 100 needed, any rank. Come immediately. His eyes widened. The post was seconds old and close to home. He called. The line picked up before the first ring. Hello. Jin Woo explained, then waited. A rank? That's fine. We just need head count. It's a C rank gate, so you won't be doing much hunting. We'll split the loot among ourselves and pay you 2 million in cash. How about it? Can you come right now? 2 million for a day's work. Tempting. He wouldn't share the dungeon's haul, but turning this down to chase a slice of loot might mean losing the sure thing. Put out today's fire first. 2 million would cover a month for him and Gina. I'll be there in under 15 minutes.
Hey everyone, Fire Scale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Jinwoo only needed 1 minute to get ready, quickly grabbed himself a taxi, and headed off to the meeting point. 9 people were already there, waiting for his arrival. The man who looked like the leader of the group waved his hand at Jinwoo. "Hey, over here." It was a bearded man with a fairly big physique. He smiled softly and walked closer while speaking to Jinwoo. "Are you Mr. Song Jinwoo?" "That's correct." "Agu, it's a relief that you found the right place so quickly. I guess this is fate. So how about we greet each other before we get started?" The bearded man briefly introduced the members of his team. The 8 of them, including himself, were regular teammates that worked together all the time, while the remaining guy was someone who also came here to make up the numbers, just like Jinwoo. Jinwoo greeted other team members and studied their countenance carefully. Thanks to his enhanced perception stat, he was able to more or less sense everyone's capabilities. 5 with a similar rank, 4 with a slightly lower rank than them, 5 ranked CS, and around 4 with D or lower. There was a regulation when attempting to clear a gate rated C. The minimum number of a party had to be 10 hunters, and more than half had to be at least ranked C or higher. Only then did the association issue a permit. It seemed that them claiming to do all the hunting and he only needed to be there to make up the numbers didn't sound like an empty boasting after all. Now, we're done with introductions. Let me briefly explain the important points to remember. The bearded man introduced himself as Hwang Dong-suk, a tanker rated C. He displayed a relaxed atmosphere, as if he possessed plenty of experience raiding dungeons. As he began describing the situations one had to keep an eye out for in the middle of a raid, someone came closer to Jinwoo. "Excuse me, looks like we're both pieces of fluff in this party." "Huh?" He was none other than the other hunter Hwang Dong-suk had brought along in order to fill up the numbers. He was a young man with a bright expression. However, unlike Jinwoo, he was actually going to participate in battles. He was ranked D, so he had the right to do so. His name was Eugene Ho, age 22. Jinwoo lightly nodded his head as Eugene Ho greeted him, before shifting his gaze away. Eugene Ho seemingly wanted to carry on with the conversation, but ended up scratching the back of his head awkwardly. He soon returned to his spot. "Hyungnim, let's stop here and go in already." TL. Hyungnim equals big brother, or a male addressing an older male. Used more as an honorific by gangsters to address someone higher up in the hierarchy. Most of the time, anyways. We'll be the ones to kill them all, so what's the point of explaining it in detail like that? Right, my ears might get blocked up with wax at this rate. When the original team members all raised their voices, Hwang Dong-suk laughed jovially and clapped his hands. "All right then, enough with the explanations. Let's get going." Everyone got ready to enter the gate. Before we enter, you too, take a look at these. Hwang Dong-suk pushed forward a page of a document to Jinwoo and Eugene Ho each. It turned out to be a simple contract. Write your names on the bottom and sign it, and we're good to go. The contents said, had not participate in any hunting, had not participate in sharing of the loot, and when the raid was over, had be paid 2 million won right away. The terms were the same as what he heard over the phone. However, they were not the ones to catch his attention. I have to promise not to question them regardless of whatever incident happens inside the dungeon. Unlike the raids organized by the association, one would not be able to claim for compensation if something happened during a raid organized by the freelancers. One of the reasons why hunters couldn't get a life insurance, either. One had to look after one's own neck, in other words. Only now did it feel real that Jinwoo had entered an assault team. While confirming the clauses, Jinwoo sneaked a glance at Eugene Ho's contract. As expected, his was different. Besides the promised 2 million, he was also going to share in the loot as well. Before signing the document, Jinwoo asked Hwang Dong-suk, "What am I supposed to do when we're inside?" "Nothing too particular. Just follow us and help us carry the luggage. That's all." "Your luggage?" Hwang Dong-suk pointed at the huge backpack one of his dongsangs pulled out from the minivan. TL. A dongsing is a gender-neutral term to denote a younger sibling. Can also be used as an honorific to denote a younger person. You'll be carrying around lunch boxes to eat when inside, several sets of clothing and equipment, first aid kits, and some other stuff. Wait, first aid kits when entering a dungeon? Jin Woo couldn't help but question this. You are not entering with a healer? I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so I'll be fine. Hwang Dong-suk smiled awkwardly. To think, this team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the composition of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin Woo smirked inwardly. They're a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract. Not because he needed that $2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. Here it is. I'm done too. Hwang Dong-suk confirmed the signatures of both men and shouted out in a loud voice, as if he was feeling really pleased today. Okay, let's get going, everyone. The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still. Hwang Dong-suk clicked his tongue. Like large tombstones, unfinished apartment buildings stood still sporadically, imparting a certain sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? Did you know? Yu Jin-ho had walked closer to Jin Woo and whispered softly that, while the employees and the investors are going through hell at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago along with $900 billion. Jin Woo gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Yu Jin-ho didn't want to leave his side at all. Well, with the exception of Jin Woo here, all 8 of them originally belonged to one team, so it'd be hard to get along with them that easily. Hyung, are you always this quiet? TL. Hyung here is slightly different from Hyung Nim from earlier on. Still means older brother, but without the tough guy connotation. Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hyung. Jin Woo couldn't ignore this kid anymore. Don't you know how to take the hint? Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints, so Was this guy simply a good-natured, or just brainless? Jin Woo wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Yu Jin-ho and that bright smile of his. However, it was indeed true that Jin Woo would get unusually nervous when he got nearer a gate. But it was par for the course, really. To other hunters, raids might come across as a legitimate source of income. But to Jin Woo, each and every one he participated so far had been a desperate, bitter struggle to make ends meet. Head get tense because of all the painful memories stuck forever in his head. It's over here. Hwang Dong-suk's steps came to an end. Oh, the hunters all let out a surprised gasp. Hwang Hyung, is this really a gate-rated C? But isn't it too big? You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already. A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked A or B were, most of the time, left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear, after all. So assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that, which meant that a gate ranked C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to clear. Hwang Dong-suk stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team. They'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone. The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. You never know, so Jin Woo lightly stretched himself just in case. Next to him, Yu Jin-ho began pulling out his own equipment from his bag. The sword and the shield coming out from his bag gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. They were definitely not something a newbie hunter could organize on his own. Hang on, he said that he never had to take hints before, So, does that mean he's from a well-to-do family? Jin Woo formed a surprised expression. Perhaps sensing Jin Woo's gaze on him, Eugene Woo confidently and bravely stood in front. Hyung, you said that you're ranked E, right? Don't worry, they'll protect you. Just stick close by me. Jin Woo scratched the back of his head. Just who would protect who? Okay, thanks for the sentiment. Let's go in as well. Regardless of how Jin Woo felt, they still followed in afterwards and safely entered the gate. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark too. Huang Dong-suk issued his first order. Hey, Gyuhwan, I need a light. All right. The magic-related hunter, Zhou Gyuhwan, created a ball of a light in midair. The surroundings became bright immediately. Huang Song-suk lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly. What the hell? Where are all the monsters? I wonder. There's no light in here, either. Now, normally, there should have been luminous stones found here and they're inside cave-like dungeons and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Yu Jinho whispered to Jin Woo from the side. Hyung, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it? Shush. Jin Woo gestured the younger man to keep quiet, because Jin Woo's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jin Woo spoke up. It's not that there aren't any, they just haven't arrived yet. Yu Jinho swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon, the party could hear what Jin Woo had heard earlier on. Only then did Huang Dong-suk realize something was amiss here. A dungeon with no luminous stones could mean. What moves around in groups, lives in darkness, and rushes towards a source of light? Oh crap! The complexions of Huang Dong-suk and his Dongsangs became ashen all at the same time. It's bugs. Bugs are coming. F*CK it, man. Why the hell did it have to be God D*MN bugs? Huang Dong-suk cried out. Get into your positions. They are coming. In front. From the other side of this lone passage, some things were madly rushing towards them in a large group. Wait, could this be an anthill? Don't say something that might jinx us, okay? Out of all the monster types, insects are the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite hardy. They always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. And the worst of that lot just so happened to be the ant types. Countless hunters made a mistake and entered the anthills only to lose their lives very quickly. Rumble, rumble. The sounds of the insect, legs rustling on the ground, noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close now. Huang Dong-suk raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects even then. His Dongsangs began raising a fuss from behind him. What's going on here? Why can't I see them? But they're close by, though. Dong-suk Hyung, can you see anything out in front? It was at this time that Jin Woo shouted out. Above you. What? Huang Dong-suk reflexively looked up. Rumble. Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late, even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved. If those were discovered too late, then Huang Dong-suk felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lining here was that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. He raised his voice and shouted out, Fire! Fire and bring them down. Once they're on the ground, it'll attract the aggro. Swish pow! Boom! Ki heck! Kia! When a few monsters fell down after getting struck by the attacks of the hunters, the rest of them followed suit and landed back on ground. Without a doubt, they were planning to engage the hunters. From here onwards, the capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Huang Dong-suk activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Huang Dong-suk at the same time. Over here, you'd *MN bugs. Kia! Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed towards Huang Dong-suk's position. Slam! Clang! Clanning! Cling! Clang! His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker Huang Dong-suk defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving. Stand by, get in position, and get ready. Huang Dong-suk waited for the right timing. Even when the bugs chomped and bit at him with terrifying intensity, Huang Dong-suk remained steadfast and waited for the chance to counterattack. Thought to make sure that the aggro wouldn't deviate from him even if the damage dealers landed a crippling blow to the enemies. This should be enough. With that thought, the real hunt had finally begun. To hunt, the real reason why the hunters were called hunters in the first place. Huang Dong-suk roared out, "Attack!" Along with that short but manly shout, all the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect horde. Ki-heck! Keek! The pained screams of the monsters rose up from here, there, and everywhere. Jin-woo stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jin-woo had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters. And he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continued to commit simple errors. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Huang Dong-suk's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Huang Dong-suk before the raid began was not just for a show, after all. Jin-suk-ah, 11 o'clock. Hyung, they are coming from your right, too. Juntae Suk-min Gyu-hwan. Take care of the right. Okay. Cheol-jin, your wrists swollen up. Retreat to the rear. Huang Hyung, this ain't much to fret about. You want to go back only after sweeping clean the entrance? We don't know how long this raid will take, so stop being hasty from the get-go. Control your pace, got that? Roger that. Perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in an excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid turns out to be pretty handy, too. Jin-woo's gaze shifted over to Yu Jinho next. When a monster bit into his shield, he kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie rank D hunter, he was defending himself admirably well. His kick A*S gears filling up the hole left behind by his lack of skills and experience. Indeed, it was not for nothing that pretty much all hunters struggled hard to get themselves good equipment. When their gazes briefly met, Yu Jinho quickly raised his thumb up. Because of his expressions that looked as if he was desperately pleading for a positive response, Jin-woo was left with no choice but to reciprocate the same gesture as well. Looking rather satisfied now, Yu Jin-woo turned around. Kaik. Whatever the case may have been, the end of the battle was drawing nearer. Once the coast was more or less clear, Huang Dong-suk issued another order to his dongsangs. Don't forget the magic crystals. We split them exactly 9 ways. Yep, this is my favorite part of the raid. Me too. Huang Dong-suk confirmed his giggling dongsangs collecting the loot and walked closer to jinwoo.ra/ch/p/ters on n/v/l/b.c//m. Agu, we survived all thanks to you. Excuse me? Well, you were the first one to alert us about them monsters coming up from above, weren't you? How did you know, though? It was a gut feeling. Jin-woo came up with a half-cooked story on the spot. Quite obviously, he couldn't come out and say that his perception stat was high. Now, could he? Oh, really? A gut feeling, huh? Well, we got lucky today. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if we didn't discover them in time, Fu-woo. Huang Dong-suk patted his chest while speaking up. It was then. One of the hunters rummaging through the carcass of the insect gestured at Huang Dong-suk to come closer. Huang Hyung, please come over here for a sec. The dongsangs had all gathered in one spot. So, Huang Dong-suk went there to join them as well. Huang Dong-suk smiled awkwardly. To think This team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the composition of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin Woo smirked inwardly. They're a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract. Not because he needed that $2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. Here it is. I'm done too. Huang Dong-suk confirmed the signatures of both men and shouted out in a loud voice, as if he was feeling really pleased today. Okay, let's get going, everyone. The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still. Huang Dong-suk clicked his tongue. Like large tombstones, unfinished apartment buildings stood still sporadically, imparting a certain sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? Did you know? Yu Jinho had walked closer to Jin Woo and whispered softly that, while the employees and the investors are going through hell at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago along with 900 billion. Jin Woo gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Yu Jinho didn't want to leave his side at all. Well, with the exception of Jin Woo here, all 8 of them originally belonged to one team, so it'd be hard to get along with them that easily. Hyung, are you always this quiet? TL. Hyung here is slightly different from Hyung Nim from earlier on. Still means older brother, but without the tough guy connotation. Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hyung. Jin Woo couldn't ignore this kid anymore. Don't you know how to take the hint? Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints, so was this guy simply a good-natured, or just brainless? Jin Woo wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Yu Jinho and that bright smile of his. However, it was indeed true that Jin Woo would get unusually nervous when he got nearer a gate. But it was par for the course, really. To other hunters, raids might come across as a legitimate source of income. But to Jin Woo, each and every one he participated so far had been a desperate, bitter struggle to make ends meet. Head get tense because of all the painful memories stuck forever in his head. It's over here. Huang Dong-suk's steps came to an end. Oh, the hunters all let out a surprised gasp. Huang Hyung, is this really a gate-rated C? But isn't it too big? You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already. A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked A or B were, most of the time, left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear, after all. So assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that, which meant that a gate ranked C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to clear. Huang Dong-suk stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team. They'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone. The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. You never know, so Jin Woo lightly stretched himself just in case. Next to him, Yu Jinho began pulling out his own equipment from his bag. The sword and the shield coming out from his bag gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. They were definitely not something a newbie hunter could organize on his own. Hang on, he said that he never had to take hints before. So, does that mean he's from a well-to-do family? Jin Woo formed a surprised expression. Perhaps sensing Jin Woo's gaze on him, Yu Jinwoo confidently and bravely stood in front. Hyung, you said that you're ranked E, right? Don't worry, they'll protect you. Just stick close by me. Jin Woo scratched the back of his head. Just who would protect who? Okay, thanks for the sentiment. Let's go in as well. Regardless of how Jin Woo felt, they still followed in afterwards and safely entered the gate. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark too. Huang Dong-suk issued his first order. Hey, Gyuhuan, I need a light. All right. The magic-related hunter, Zhou Gyuhuan, created a ball of a light in midair. The surroundings became bright immediately. Huang Song-suk lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly. What the hell? Where are all the monsters? I wonder. There's no light in here, either. Now, normally, there should have been luminous stones found here and they're inside cave-like dungeons and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Yu Jinho whispered to Jinwoo from the side. Hyung, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it? Shush. Jinwoo gestured the younger man to keep quiet, because Jinwoo's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jinwoo spoke up. It's not that there aren't any, they just haven't arrived yet. Yu Jinho swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon, the party could hear what Jinwoo had heard earlier on. Only then did Huang Dong-suk realize something was amiss here. A dungeon with no luminous stones could mean. Well, in that case, I think you should keep your wits about you, too. Jinwoo lightly patted Yu Jinho on his shoulder and followed after the other hunters walking deeper inside the dungeon. What was he talking about now, out of the blue? Yu Jinho tilted his head in confusion before chasing after the departing group. Asterisk. The cave seemed to go on forever. However, bizarrely enough, they hadn't come across a single monster as of yet. Since the dungeon was shaped like a long cavern, there was no way that they'd miss each other, too. Could it be that the crawlies at the entrance were everything? Yeah, no way. Now, that would be really strange. Still, there should be a boss at the end, right? Without one, why would a gate remain open then? The opinions of the hunters were shared among themselves as they roamed the expansive but empty interior of this big dungeon. Hold it. Huang Dong-suk in the lead suddenly stopped walking. He stopped so abruptly that people behind him ran into his back. The hunter whose nose had slammed into the head of the guy in front asked with a sullen expression. Ouch, what the heck? Huang Hyung, what is it? Gyuhuan, I need a light over there. Zhou Gyuhuan controlled the ball of light floating up in the air and redirected it further up ahead, exactly where Huang Dong-suk had been pointing at. Holy **T. All the hunters spat out low groans. The torn wings, legs, torsos, and even heads of the bugs' remains of the various dead bugs were strewn about everywhere as far as the light shone. The further into the cave the light got to, the greater the amount of the remains they could see. And also, a huge chamber located at the end of it all. That's the boss room. Someone muttered out softly. Huang Dong-suk nodded his head. Everyone, get your equipment ready. The hunters quickly armed themselves. Nervousness was evident on the expressions of everyone present. With Huang Dong-suk leading them in, the rest of the hunters cautiously and silently entered the boss room. However, their silence only lasted for a few seconds afterwards. Jackpot! The hunter with a red nose cried out. He was none other than the guy whose nose slammed into someone's back of the head. Originally, it was forbidden to shout out too loudly inside a dungeon, because there was a possibility that a monster they didn't have to fight might hear the noise and run towards where the hunters were. However, none of the others scolded the red nose for his mistake. Wowzers! How much could all of these be? Is a real jackpot in it? Everyone was way too busy gasping out in admiration and happiness. That was why. Wait a second. When Zhou Gyuhuan fixed the beam of light high up in the middle of the air, the situation within the room became clear for all to see, as well as the jewel-like stones jutting out from one of the walls of the cave. They are mana stones. The entire wall is made up of them. These mana stones reflected the light attractively and caused the eyes of the hunters to sparkle brightly in greed as well. Mana stones. They were one of the treasures that could be found inside dungeons. Although each stone possessed a lower amount of magic energy compared to a magic crystal extracted from a monster, they almost always were found in large quantity. So if one were able to mine them, one could earn a substantial profit. Besides, the mana stone deposit they had discovered was incredibly large. The entire wall of the huge cave was actually filled up with these stones. Let's do a quick calculation. A hunter with a mathematical brain began moving his fingers in a hurry. If we combine them all, we could be earning as much as 1 billion. Even if we split 9 ways, we're looking at a payout of over 100 million per head. Oh. Smiles formed on the faces of the hunters. Eugene Ho had been staying at the back until then, and when he heard those words, he began poking Jin Woo's side with his elbow. Hyung, show me your copy of the contract. Why? Just trust me on this one. I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to law. You see, Jin Woo shrugged his shoulders once and handed over the contract as requested. Eugene Ho walked over to Huang Dong-suk while carrying that. Excuse me, seniors? I want to ask you about something. The eyes of the celebrating hunters immediately focused on Eugene Ho next. Eugene Ho flapped open Jin Woo's contract and showed it to them. Mr. Leader, this is Jin Woo Hyung's contract. As you can see, there is no clause about splitting the treasure beside the magic crystals earned from the hunting itself. Everyone there caught on to what Eugene Ho was trying to say. It's customary to share the treasures or other rare items found in a dungeon equally among all the participants of the raid. The splitting of the profit, in this case, is different from monopolizing the magic crystals of the monsters one hunted themselves. In other words, the mana stones had to be split 10 ways, not 9. The light within the hunter's eyes changed greatly, but Huang Dong-suk simply smiled and took a step forward. Of course, we'll be sharing them equally. I know the rules well. We still have some things to take care of before that, though. Huang Dong-suk raised his index finger and pointed his front. Eugene Ho grandly flinched from that. He thought that he was the one being pointed at, actually. He shuddered slightly and turned his head around to take a look and finally spotted a spider as huge as a house quietly squatting way over there. Heek! Eugene Ho began taking hurried steps backwards and covered his mouth after seeing the spider's appearance. As if it was fast asleep, the huge spider didn't even budge an inch from the spot. Around the creature, there were empty shells of the dead insects piled up as high as a mountain. A fair few of them were half-eaten, and there were bodily fluids mixed in among them as well, basically resembling a trash pit full of food waste. That's the boss, huh? Did that thing eat the bugs inside the dungeon? Well, it sure did eat a lot, didn't it? Hunters glared at the spider and passed their opinions one at a time. Huang Dong-suk called the others to gather around. Jin Woo and Eugene Ho, too, stood in front of Huang Dong-suk as well. As you all know very well, as soon as the boss is killed, the gate will start closing up. So, before we kill the spider, let's mine the mana stones first. Everyone nodded their heads. Cheol-jin, did you bring along the equipment for the job? The man named Lee Cheol-jin shook his head. No. Who knew we'd find mana stones inside a C-ranked dungeon? All the mining equipment is back in the van. Oh, come on now, dude. Didn't this Hyung always tell you to keep it around, just in case? My bad. I'm really sorry about this. Lee Cheol-jin grinned brightly and began apologizing to Huang Dong-suk, the rest of his teammates, and even to Jin Woo. Huang Dong-suk spoke up while scratching the back of his head. Agu, what a bother this has become. In that case, why don't you two stay here and wait? We'll go outside and fetch the equipment in the meantime. When the hunters tried to leave all at the same time, Eugene Ho formed a confused expression and quickly asked them, Are you telling me and Jin Woo Hyung to remain in the boss room? Huang Dong-suk smiled with his eyes and replied, The B***** is yet to wake up even though we've been talking loudly for a while now. So, I'm sure nothing's going to happen here. Well, there are some things I want to speak to my boys, too, so we'll take a short smoke break as well. But don't worry, it won't take long. Jin Woo listened to Huang Dong-suk's rather detailed explanations and smirked inwardly. You finally revealed your true colors. Huh. But all of you are leaving at the same time? Aren't you fools taking us way too lightly? They were looking down on him because of his low rank, of course. As Jin Woo expected him to, Hwang Dong-suk finally began to move. It was slightly different from the youth's expectation, though. It had been 4 years since he became a hunter. During that time, he had met many hunters. One of them was an Ajusi named Mr. O. He had retired from the life of a freelancer, but still showed up now and then to help out with the association's work. Be careful of geckos. Mr. O used to say that rather often. When one participated in raids, one would inevitably encounter a dangerous situation. When such an event happened, some crooked, immoral hunters would try to sacrifice someone who had been fighting alongside them until then, with some flimsy pretext of them not being in the same team, to begin with, or that the other party was simply weaker than they were. All just to buy themselves some time for their safe escape. It was exactly like a gecko cutting off its own tail and running away. Cutting its tail off. Mr. O took to calling those types of hunters geckos, and such actions as cutting off one's tail. The regulation stated that in order to enter a gate ranked C, the minimum number of participants had to be 10. Yet, Hwang Dong-suk's team only had 8 members. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so ITL'll be fine. Indeed, he stuck to only 8 members, even though his team had entered countless gates ranked C so much so that he could say this way until now. They obviously have no reason to fill the last 2 spots. They needed a tail that they could cut off at any given moment, after all. There was a reason why they were willing to accept anyone, whether it was a hunter ranked E or a newbie. And now, Hwang Dong-suk had decided to abandon both Song Jin-woo and Eugene Ho for a slightly different reason than usual. But it's a good thing for me. Jin-woo had figured out Hwang Dong-suk's intentions pretty early on, but chose to say nothing. This was what he wanted, actually. However, unlike Jin-woo, who was full of confidence, Eugene Ho was quite different, as he only started his work as a hunter today. Eugene Ho spoke with a voice full of worries. No, wait a minute. That is just. Why don't we leave together? It was then Jin-woo spotted one of the hunters at the back raise his hand towards his hips. So, he placed his hand on Eugene Ho's shoulder and spoke. ITL'll be fine. Well, guard this place. The hunter's hand heading towards his waist stopped. Hyung. Eugene Ho was quite surprised and confused, but Jin-woo simply kept his mouth shut and lightly shook his head. Sure, the kid was noisy and got on his nerves just a tad, but Jin-woo wasn't planning to let him die here. After all, didn't he try to get the fair share for Jin-woo just now? Although that would have ultimately put him in a disadvantageous position. Hwang Dong-suk formed a smile as he looked at the 2 youths. Our van isn't parked too far, so it shouldn't take long. Well then, Hwang Dong-suk and his lackeys quickly escaped from the boss room, and their footsteps rapidly got further and further away. Eugene Ho turned around and demanded answers from Jin-woo. How could you say those things, Hyung? What if that thing wakes up? Without a doubt, he was quite scared of that spider. Looks like this kid hasn't grasped the situation quite yet. Jin-woo inwardly clicked his tongue. It was too much of a bother to explain everything, too. Instead of an answer, he began loosening his body once more. Around the same time, Hwang Dong-suk turned around towards the boss room. The hunters following him also came to a stop. They had arrived at a far enough spot from the boss room now. At this sort of distance, there was no danger of being overheard. Hwang Dong-suk smiled deeply and signaled to Joe Gyuhwan next to him with his chin. Hey, Gyuhwan, block up the entrance to the boss room. Should I blow it up? That's right. But don't block it up completely, okay? We gotta go in there a bit later, too. Lee Cheol-jin then asked him. Hwang Hyung, is there a reason to beat around the bush like this? Why don't we just kill them now and get started right away? Hwang Dong-suk's expression crumpled and glared at the other guy. There was no need for him to maintain the fake smile now. At least that was one less thing to worry about. Am I bad? Lee Cheol-jin averted his gaze in fear. Hwang Dong-suk tsk sked. What if we start fighting there and the spider wakes up? How will you mine those mana stones and carry them out then? I'm sorry. Jo Gyuhwan butted in. Hwang Hyung, since we're on that subject, wouldn't that thing wake up while we try to mine the mana stones? If so, we might end up losing big, That creature was strong enough to prey on those already scary insect-type monsters. If the team got sneak attacked in the middle of the mining operation, the losses they incur would be enormous. That is why Huang Dong-suk smirked deeply. We're trying to offer those two up as food, aren't we? Zhou Guhuan nodded his head, as if he had finally understood the plan. Right now, no one knew just when the spider would wake up. It could be 10 hours from now, maybe 1 hour, or it could be a minute later. That was why they had to wake the spider up now and feed it. No matter how dull that monster happened to be, it'd still wake up from the impact strong enough to cause the entrance to cave in. Huang Dong-suk continued on. We mine the mana stones when the spider goes back to sleep with a full belly. The permit they got from the association would last for 5 days. They still had over 4.5 days of leeway. In other words, they would wait, and if the spider didn't go back to sleep, they would simply dispose of it and mine as much as they could before the gate closed shut. They wouldn't be able to mine everything within the hour, but with Song Jinwoo and Yu Jinho no longer in the picture, they should be able to avoid losing out too much. Wouldn't that be far more preferable than working under the constant fear? Their safety was the #1 priority, after all. Of course, that's the worst possible scenario. If they were lucky, the profit would be divided 8 ways. They mine all the mana stones and even monopolize the spider, too. As an added bonus, those expensive-looking equipment on Yu Jinho's body would become theirs, too. That sword and the shield, they have to be worth at least a few 100 million won. They had nothing to lose from this transaction at all. The corners of Huang Dong-suk's lips arched up. Block up the entrance, so we can go and take a smoke break. Quick. Yes, Hyung. Zhou Guhuan replied as a blinding light began to gather on the tip of his fingers. Yu Jinho's gaze was fixed on the sleeping spider. Even his breathing was cautious. He then asked, his expression rigid with fear. That spider be *starred. It's not gonna suddenly wake up on us, right? Who knows? Jinwoo remained economical with his words. He had more or less figured out what would happen next. But if he said out aloud his thoughts in full, then Yu Jinho might faint from fear. Now that I think about it, those words were the first to come out from Yu Jinho's mouth in the past 5 minutes or so. It seemed that he was really scared right now. And he used to be so talkative, too. Then it happened. Kaboom! With a loud explosion, the entrance of the boss room suddenly caved in. Yu Jinho hurriedly ran towards the entrance. Unfortunately for him, the entrance was completely blocked up by the fallen rocks. He pushed on with all his might, but not a single stone budged. Jinwoo slowly walked over there in the meantime. Groan! Hyung, help me push this. Yu Jinho was still giving his all to push the blockade of stones away. He said his name was Zhou Guhuan. Before the explosion, there was a flash of light. A sorcerer ranked C that controlled light. This was no doubt that be *starred's handiwork. Jinwoo placed his hand on the fallen rocks. If I want to, I can get out of here at any time. He could sense the weight of the stones through his hands. They weren't as heavy as they looked. When he very slightly pushed, he felt the wall tremble gently. Of course, he wasn't thinking of leaving at all, anyways. Yu Jinho stopped pushing at the stones and cried out, as if he had finally figured out the truth. His face now reddened in fury. Yu Jinho shifted his gaze over to Jinwoo. Those sons of Astra's cheese are trying to kill us. They don't want to share the mana stones, so they block the exit and let the spider devour us. Wow, you figured that out so quickly, Sherlock. Jinwoo was rolling his eyes in his head, but still played along for the time being. Looks that way. This is troublesome. Heek. Suddenly, Yu Jinho's reddened complexion paled in an instant. Would that be the look of someone whose blood had gone cold? No need to ask him what happened. though the silhouette of the giant monster was oh so clearly reflected in Eugene Ho's eyes. Jin Woo turned around. Kuruk. The spider's sleep had been interrupted by that loud explosion, and it was slowly raising its massive body up. The body the size of a house. Dozens upon dozens of eyes. That horrifying mouth. 8 long legs. Now that it had begun moving for real, it looked far more terrifying than when it was actually in a deep slumber. Eugene Ho leaked out a fearful gasp. His body had frozen stiff like a statue. On the other hand, Jin Woo kept his sight firmly locked on the spider as he calmly summoned the poison fong of Kasaka from his inventory. You're mine. This was the perfect opportunity to test out his enhanced stats. The poison fong of Kasaka appeared in his right hand. Swish. Not as if it had always been there. Jin Woo gripped the dagger's hilt tightly. The reason why a hunter was called a hunter from this moment on was when the true hunt would begin. Hang on a second, Hyung. However, Eugene Ho swiftly snatched up Jin Woo's sleeve just as the latter took a couple of steps towards the spider. What are you trying to do? Eugene Ho's hand was shaking pretty bad. Jin Woo used his left thumb to point over his shoulder. Obviously, I'm going to hunt that. Jin Woo had been following around Huang Dong-suk's group until now for that purpose. But in order to monopolize the remaining monsters in the dungeon, as soon as Huang Dong-suk cut the tail and ran away. This was a splendid opportunity to swallow whole all the experience points and magic crystals. Well, only if the boss hadn't devoured every monster in this dungeon. That is, if that hadn't been the case, then he would have profited a lot more, though. What a missed opportunity that was .v///ISSD and 0v L/B and / for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C. However, Eugene Ho's facial expression clearly displayed his disbelief, as he had no idea about Jin Woo's special constitution. What is this Hyung rambling on about? There was something Head heard from someone somewhere before. A person would stop thinking rationally the moment he or she received a mental shock beyond their capability to deal with. The hunter ranked is standing right in front said that Head hunt the boss of a C-rank dungeon. If this was not an act of irrationality, then what else could it be? Eugene Ho asked again, this time looking rather dumbfounded. Hyung, you want to hunt that thing? For real? Jin Woo scratched the top of his head, looking somewhat troubled, before replying back with a question of his own. What? You want to hunt it then? Part 10. Give and Take. Jin Woo turned around even before Eugene Ho had the chance to respond. There was no need to listen to his reply, anyway. Even now, Eugene Ho was barely managing to stand up straight as his legs continued to shudder. From the get-go, he didn't expect anything from Eugene Ho. Rather, he was relieved that the kid didn't follow after him while saying Head lend his aid or some such. Hell, just get in my way, anyway. Jin Woo slowly approached the spider. The spider must have discovered the human's presence as well, as it was changing its direction towards them while shuffling on its 8 legs. It was coming closer. As if it found the never-before-seen prey rather strange, the spider didn't immediately rush out. Using its thick and long legs to push down on the ground, it inched closer and closer. Fuwu. As that giant monster slowly filled up his entire view, Jin Woo's breathing became heavy. His heart began thumping faster and faster, too. Thump, 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 thump. Jin Woo controlled his wayward breathing and did his absolute best to calm himself down. He had to remain focused and steady here. He recalled the exact feelings he felt when he stood at the end of the 2nd floor of the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon. He then recalled seeing the poison-fanged blue Kasaka for the first time. However, this giant spider in front of him didn't emit as much pressure as that snake did, meaning he could definitely do this. From the get-go, if he thought that this boss was impossible to clear alone, he wouldn't even have stayed here. Kuruk. They had gotten close enough that his face was now reflecting rather clearly on those smooth, jet-black eyes of the spider. Jin Woo's own eyes narrowed to a slit. The exoskeleton looks pretty tough. Can my dagger even damage it? Quite obviously, a dagger would have a shorter reach than a steel longsword Jin Woo used before. So, if he wanted to cause a deep wound, he needed to strengthen his attacks. Jin Woo held the dagger in the reverse grip. He figured that it'd be easier to hurt the monster by holding the blade in this fashion. Kurik. Finally, the spider stood before Jinwoo. Then, it raised its two front legs up and bent them at an angle. What is it trying to do? His curiosity lasted only for a brief moment. Jinwoo's eyes shot open wide next. Slam! If he didn't instinctively tilt his body out of the way, the spider's legs would have penetrated his chest just now. The spider's legs stabbed into the ground behind him before rising up in the air, its joints folding back up, and from the ends of its legs, pieces of the rocky ground fell. Jinwoo sneaked a glance behind him. The stone floor now had a pretty substantial hole in it. If I got hit by that, it wouldn't have ended with me feeling a bit of ache in my chest, huh? Jinwoo's glare sharpened even more. Now was the time he needed to concentrate even harder. It's coming. Swish! The spider's legs that initially resembled bullets being fired could now be captured in his eyes. Left. He ducked his head lower to evade the spider's left front leg. Right? He tilted his body back and let the spider's right leg brush past him before he took a step closer. He evaded the spider's leg that took aim at his head once more and took 2 steps forward this time. Left, right, left, right, left. Slam. Boom. Quong. Kaboom. Slam. Boom. Quong. Kaboom. The spider's legs stabbed and destroyed the ground so loudly that his ears actually felt numb from the pain. Jinwoo evaded the spider's attacks one by one and got closer and closer to the monster. Meanwhile, Eugene-ho couldn't quite believe his own eyes. What the hell is up with this guy? Even though he was watching from afar, those attacks were so ferocious that all the hair on the back of his head was standing up. However, that man was evading them all while standing right in front of the monster, not to mention he was actually getting closer too. Seeing that efficient and calm movement, Eugene-woo felt a chill run down his backside. And he's supposed to be an E rank. There was no freaking way. If it was him standing there and not Song Jin-woo, then he'd be torn to a rag by now. He didn't have any confidence whatsoever to dodge those attacks even once. However, Jin-woo was evading them without making a single mistake. An E rank doing something that a D rank hunter, such as himself, couldn't even dream of doing? There could only be one explanation for this. He is a fake registrant. Eugene-ho's expression hardened. Out of those highly talented hunters, there were a few who could freely control his or her magical energy. If they felt like it, they could easily fake the results and get a lower ranking. Hunters who got assigned lower ranks than what they should have got in the first place simply by hiding a portion of their magic energy, such people were labeled as fake registrants. And perhaps more alarmingly, most of those fake registrants carried around rather sinister motives for doing so, such as that serial killer whose hobby was to enter low-ranked dungeons and murder all the other lower-ranked hunters. As only those who were present knew what happened inside a dungeon, there was no better place to commit crimes than the world behind the gates. Eugene-ho nervously swallowed his saliva. Suddenly, Jin-woo seemed far scarier than the spider. And just why did I have to insist on coming to this place? Eugene-ho felt like he'd break out in sobs at any moment now. Swish, swish, swish. In the meantime, the spider's attacks poured down without a break. Jin-woo dodged all of those attacks and grew confident of his victory. Having decreased the distance between them little by little, the head of the spider was almost within his reach now. The attack pattern of the spider was rather simple, so he could get close to it pretty easily. For now, he'll aim for its eyes. It was the basics of all basic rules to attack the monster's weak points. So he decided to attack the eyes of the spider, which looked to be the weakest point in its defenses. As soon as I stabbed my dagger in those eyes, just as Jin-woo made up his mind, he suddenly sensed that the spider's attacks had slowed down for some reason. Swish! Swish! Was it because his eyes had adjusted fully to the speed of its attacks? Boom! Slam! No, that wasn't it. His eyes might have been misled, but his hearing could not be fooled. The loud noises coming from the exploding ground came to him a beat slower than before, since a few seconds ago. Jin-woo was already pretty confident of his rather excellent sense of hearing, so he could feel this subtle change. It was then a certain ominous premonition flickered past in his brain. When he took a closer look, The muscles around the vicinity of the spider's mouth were trembling quite imperceptibly. Why is it trying to open its mouth now? Jinwoo had been getting ready to jump up 3 meters and reach the head of the spider, but he sensed something ominous was about to happen. Jinwoo hurriedly changed the direction of his jump from forward to his rear. And then, splash! From the mouth of the spider, dirty and turbid liquid spewed out. Jinwoo rolled on the floor for a second before regaining his balance. He quickly took a look behind him. The spot on the floor he had been standing only until a second ago was now emitting smoke as it got scorched black. ra/p/ters on n/v/lb/c/m. Sizzle. Stones on the floor melted away powerlessly. Jinwoo swallowed his saliva after seeing that. If I had jumped forward just now, it wouldn't have been only the floor that was melting right now. Perhaps sensing that Jinwoo had been distracted, the spider rushed towards him in no time. Rustle! Jinwoo raised his head. By then, the spider was already right in front of his eyes. Jinwoo jumped up to evade the giant spider's legs. Slam! The B*****'*'''''*s attacks had recommenced. D*******. After that, Jinwoo got near the monster's head several times more. Every time he did that, though, he had no choice but to retreat in order to evade that disgusting digestive juice. When the spider's attack pattern had become 2, it became that much harder to deal with it. If he got closer after evading all those snapping legs, the digestive juice spewed out. Its legs attacked again once he had to retreat to a distance because of the juices. ***T. Feeling frustrated now, he decided to attack the legs with his dagger. Unfortunately, the legs were also covered in that thick exoskeleton, and no matter how many times he cut it, he couldn't even nick it once. Jinwoo bit his lower lip. This isn't going to work. The spider only needed its 2 front legs to attack him, but on the other hand, he needed to use his entire body to evade them. It was obvious who would tire out first here. Tiredness. 57. As he thought, his tiredness stat was rapidly rising up. When this stat hit 70, his speed would decrease, and when it reaches 90, his breathing would become too heavy and it become that much harder to freely move about. He was running out of time. If I want to get closer to it, then speed. His speed was the issue. Boom, 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 boom. Wait, speed, is it? As Jinwoo continued to barely evade each of the legs raining down, a thought entered his head. Yeah, I had that, didn't I? He indeed possessed a single active skill. He had forgotten all about it, because there was no need for him to use it, until now. Dash! You've activated skill, dash. Your movement speed has increased by 30%. 1 mana will be spent every minute during its activation. Along with those messages, Jinwoo's body became even faster as if a booster had been activated. Evading the spider's legs had become even easier as a result. Boom, boom, boom. He swiftly evaded the spider legs, slamming down like lightning bolts, and in the blink of an eye, arrived before the monster. Taken by surprise, the spider hurriedly spewed out its digestive juice. However, thanks to the increase in his speed, his movement had now this certain composure to it. Jinwoo easily evaded the digestive juice and pounced towards the spider's head. Slash! His dagger slashed at the spider's eyes. Effect: paralysis has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Effect: bleeding has been activated. The target's stamina will decrease by 1% per second. Yes. One of the 2 special effects the Poison Fang of Kasaka possessed had activated successfully. Roar! The spider roared out and staggered about. Jinwoo didn't miss this opening. The moment his 2 feet landed back on the ground, he jumped up again and climbed on the spider's body to get to the top of its head. The spider went crazy and swung its legs all over the place, but Jinwoo wasn't going to let those blind attacks land on him. Slam! Boom! Kaboom! Holes continued to appear on the poor, blameless ground instead. Now standing on top of the spider's head, Jinwoo began stabbing the eyes of the spider with his dagger. Stab! Stab! Stop! Roar! Stab! Stab! Roar! The spider rampaged around this way and that, but Jinwoo endured till the end and continued to shove his dagger into the head of the spider. Who are you, Ruck? The spider began tottering about dangerously. It was obviously getting damaged now. Seeing this, Jinwoo's hands picked up speed, and eventually, the huge body of the spider finally tilted to the side. Thud! However, Jinwoo didn't stay his hand. No, he kept going at it, until the spider was dead for sure. Stab! 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 Kurik! Kurururu! Along with the final gasp from the spider, several messages popped up in his view. You've killed the owner of this dungeon. Level up. I did it. While covered from head to toe in the spider blood, Jinwoo raised his hands up high. Maybe because it was a boss monster, his level jumped up by 3. Status window. Name: Song Jinwoo. Level: 21. Class: None. Title: None. HP: 2,600. MP: 391. Tiredness: 0. Stat: Strength: 53. Stamina: 30. Agility: 38. Intelligence: 30. Perception: 32. Available points to distribute: 0. Skills: Passive skills: Unknown LV Max. Tenacity LV1. Active skills: Dash LV1. From level 18, he had jumped up to reach 21 in one go. And that wasn't even the end. Besides the level up messages, something else also popped up as well. Tiering. Store. Buy function is now available with your level having reached 20. Oh, so I can finally spend those gold things now. That was a nice message, for sure. However, now wasn't the right time to relaxedly browse through the store. Rumble. The K began to shake just a little. With the death of the dungeon's owner, the entrance of the dungeon will be destroyed in 1 hour. Remaining time: 59 minutes, 58 seconds. Indeed, he had to get out of this place before the gate closed on him, after all. Browsing through the store could be done once he was somewhere safe. Just as Jinwoo was about to climb down, he spotted something gleaming brightly in the middle of the spider's head. Is that an item? However, unlike the monsters from the instant dungeon, there was no message about recovered items, nor could he automatically claim them. What could it be, then? Jinwoo pondered briefly before realizing what it was. Ah, these things have magic crystals, don't they? No matter how busy he was, how could he forget something so valuable like that? Jinwoo extracted the magic crystal hidden deep inside the head of the dead spider. This was a C-rank magic crystal extracted from a boss monster, so it should at least go for around 10 million won. Easy. As the trophy for his glamorous victory, this would do very nicely. Jinwoo lightly jumped down from the dead spider's head. Tap! He landed lightly on the ground and turned around, and well, he discovered more gleaming lights, this time coming from the spider's belly. Not only that, but several of them. Even Jinwoo was now feeling rather surprised. He heard stories of some monsters possessing 2, 3 magic crystals, but there were simply too many lights to say those could all be magic crystals. What could they be, then? He used the dagger to slice open the belly and continued on to its stomach, which resulted in half-digested remains of the insect-type monsters to pour out to the ground. And the lights were coming from those. No way. Jinwoo rummaged through the dead insects one at a time, and just as he suspected, they all possessed their magic crystals. Sure, a few of them had melted down and become smaller than before, but quite a lot of them had survived and remained as good as new. When he collected the intact ones, he counted over 10. I really hit the jackpot this time. He came to earn this month's rent, but at this rate, he'd be earning way more than that. H. Youngnim. When Jinwoo looked back, he saw Eugene Ho there. Please, put them in here. Eugene Ho then proceeded to carefully tuck in the magic crystals belonging to Jinwoo inside his equipment bag. Next, he reached inside the corner of the same bag and pulled out a thermos before pouring the flask's content on its lid. Hyungnim, you must be feeling thirsty. Please drink this. It's water. Indeed, it was a cold, refreshing cup of water filled right up to the edge. Why is this kid doing something no one asked him to? Since Jinwoo was feeling thirsty anyway, he took the thermos lid to drink the water. But his head never stopped tilting in the meantime. Gulp, gulp. The water slid down his throat and refreshed him quite nicely. Hyungnim, did you enjoy it? Before he had noticed it, the honorific had changed to Hyungnim, too. Yeah, it's refreshing. Jinwoo spoke his earnest opinion and handed the lid over to you, Jinho. And the things you saw in here. Even before Jinwoo could finish his sentence, Yu Jinho quickly cut in, as if to say that there's nothing to worry about. Of course, I won't say anything to anyone and take this secret with me to my grave. No, hang on. No need to take it to your grave. But of course I will. It'll be a promise between Hyungnim and I, after all. Well, in that case. Okay, if you say so. You don't have to worry about a thing, Hyungnim. It wasn't as if anyone would believe the claim that a rank E soloed the boss of a rank C gate anyway. Still, the kid was saying he'd voluntarily keep his mouth shut, and that would certainly make his life a bit easier. I thought he didn't know how to take a hint, but he's pretty quick on the uptake on things like this. Is there anything else you'd like to tell me, Hyungnim? No, not particularly. Well, that sounded a bit suspect there. Jinwoo studied the overly polite mannerism of Yu Jinho and inwardly questioned his motives, before coming to a conclusion of his own. Well, yeah, from Yu Jinho's perspective, I did save his life and all. Wasn't it the most obvious thing in the world that you become really courteous and humble towards a person who saved your life? When looked at that way, his attitude made more sense. The reality of the situation was slightly different from that, though. Rumble. The dungeon shook around for a bit again before its tremor stopped. That tremor was the reminder that the gate would close in a little while. The tremors would progressively get worse as time went by, and just before the gate closed, it'd morph into a full-blown earthquake. Let's get out of here. Yes, Hyungnim. Jinwoo began walking towards the entrance. Before they reached it, though, there was a sudden flash of light, and the rocks blocking up the entrance collapsed. Boom! Afterwards, Hwang Dong-suk and his goons rushed into the boss room. As soon as spotting the dead spider behind Jinwoo, their expressions became dumbfounded. What the hell? It's really dead? Did those two hunt it? That spider must have been nothing much, even with that big body and all. Well, if a rank D and a rank E managed to kill it, then. Hwang Hyung, what should we do now? Hwang Dong-suk scratched his chin while gazing at Jinwoo and Yu Jinho. With the spider dead, the gate would soon close. It'd be too late to start mining the mana stones now. They hadn't even finished getting ready, yet the remaining time was now less than an hour. It was time for the plan B. So, he loudly called out to Yu Jinho. Yu Jinho! Yu Jinho flinched and took a step back. His face was full of nervous tension. An oily smile floated up on Hwang Dong-suk's face. V///ISSDN0V L/B/N/ for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C. I thought your gear looked real eye-catching, so we did a background check on ya. And it turns out that you're a son of a real big shot. The son of the Eugen Construction's owner, Yu Myung-han, no less. So what? We'll give you a chance. I've got some stuff to discuss with your old man, you see. However, it'd get real troublesome for us if the matters of this place get out. So, if you wish to live, you better become our accomplice. An accomplice? Hwang Dong-suk pointed at Jinwoo with his chin. Being on the receiving end of that disgusting stare, Jinwoo's forehead creased for a second. Kill Song Jinwoo. What? Yu Jinho freaked out, and Hwang Dong-suk chuckled as if he found that expression rather funny. The thing was, he used his phone to do an online search and found out that Yu Jinho's father was the owner of the top construction company in the country. Seeing that, a sinister scheme formed in his head. Head filmed the scene of Yu Jinho killing Song Jinwoo and then, under the pretext of keeping his mouth shut, blackmail Yu Myung-han. The known wealth of Yu Myung-han is supposedly around 10 trillion won, wasn't it? TL, almost $9 billion. He might be able to reel in several times more money than mining these mana stones if he played his cards right. That's the only way you'll leave this place alive. As long as you kill Song Jinwoo with your own hands, we'll let you live. If not, we kill both of you. Hwang Dong-suk's eyes became very hostile right away. What are you hesitating for? No one will know what happens inside a dungeon, anyway. Wait, could it be that you're scared of a rank E, even though you're a rank D? Eugene Ho turned his head to his side. Jin Woo shrugged his shoulders as his answer. He was implying that Eugene Ho should do whatever he felt like. With a determined expression, Eugene Ho unsheathed the sword on his hips. Finally, he made up his mind. Huh. A smile formed on Huang Dong-suk's mouth. Unfortunately for him, his expectation was not met. Still holding that sword, Eugene Ho stood alongside Jin Woo. Ho-oh, so you want to team up with that guy and fight us, is that right? Huang Dong-suk muttered softly. A scion of a well-to-do family got lucky and killed a rank C boss, and it looked like his ego had become bloated somewhat as a result. Zhou Guhuan whispered from the side. Hyung, what should we do now? Huang Dong-suk lowered his voice, so both Jin Woo and Eugene Ho wouldn't be able to hear him. For now, take care of Song Jin Woo first. We gotta hold on to that potential money bag. Our losses today are pretty substantial after all. Okay, we'll do. Zhou Gaihuan's hands began emitting bright light next. Seeing this, Jin Woo's eyes narrowed to a slit. In the end, they want to have a go, huh? This would be his very first time fighting against other hunters. However, he wasn't planning to go easy on these B** stars that have aimed for his life several times already. But then this happened. Tearing. There was that mechanical beep again. An emergency quest has been generated. An emergency quest. Jin Woo raised his head. He didn't even say anything about wanting to look at the contents. Yet the quest window spread out before his eyes without his consent. Now, that was a first. Emergency quest. Kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the player. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, a corresponding penalty will be given. The number of enemies left to kill, 8. The number of killed enemies, 0. Jin Woo's eyes opened wider. In order to complete the quest, Huang Dong-suk and his teammates must all die. It was then a beam of light flashed right before his eyes. The light beams left Zhou Guhuan's hands and flew straight at Jin Woo. Boom! Flung away by the explosion, Jin Woo's figure flew at a frightening speed and slammed into the cave wall. Slam! A portion of the wall collapsed and fell on top of Jin Woo. Tumble. Hyungnim. Eugene Ho froze on the spot from surprise. Don't sweat over the dead guy, and why don't you come over here? Huang Dong-suk beckoned with his fingers. Eugene Ho stared at the spot where Jin Woo was. Just like what Huang Dong-suk had implied, Jin Woo wasn't moving an inch as he remained buried under the debris. You murderers. Tears pooled around Eugene Ho's eyes. Huang Dong-suk and his Dongsangs simply giggled at the label of murderers thrown at their way. Well, that was the truth to begin with anyway. Just how many died by their hands inside many other dungeons? While they were looking at Eugene Ho and continued to smile, Jin Woo was under the pile of rubble, doubting his own eyes at the moment. The contents of the quest were slowly changing. That was why. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the and asterisk at hashtag. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, hashtag $% dollar hashtag $% and asterisk hashtag $% dollar. A few words suddenly became illegible before changing their shapes. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards you. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, your heart will cease functioning. What a clear-cut threat that was. If he didn't finish the quest as intended, it would kill him instead. Kill if I don't want to be killed. Is that it? The contents were pretty shocking, but Jin Woo's fluster didn't remain for long. No, his flustered mind rapidly morphed into one of relief. Even he found it hard to believe, but that was the truth. There was this fear that always lingered in his mind, starting from the day these quests popped up in front of his eyes alongside stat values and such. What would happen to me if this mysterious phenomenon suddenly stopped? What if all these things only happened as a coincidence, and they could end at any given moment? Such fear always accompanied him. However, through this emergency quest, the truth became clear. Things happening to him were not a coincidence, nor were they some weird goodwill from someone. If the quest was generated by something holding some form of goodwill, then it should have just said overcome this danger and not threaten him to kill him as a penalty. The system had a clear purpose. It was either make Song Jinwoo strong or need a strong Song Jinwoo. And depending on the situation, Mihu could kill other hunters at the drop of a hat, even. He could glean such intentions from the system now. Jinwoo felt reassured by that revelation. What a relief that it was not a coincidence. That it definitely had a goal. Whenever he found himself in danger, he yearned to be stronger. He so dearly wished to stop living the life where it was no different from dangling precariously on the edge of a cliff. But on that fateful day, during the most dangerous moments of his life, his opportunity came. The goal of this system and Jinwoo's wishes lined up perfectly. The system is using me, and him using the system. That was all there was to it. As long as there was an end goal, a purpose, this phenomenon would never suddenly vanish from his eyes. Jinwoo slowly got up from the rubble. HP 1360/2600. As expected, a magic spell shot by a rank C hunter. It was only a single hit, yet his HP had almost halved. There was no more room left to take it easy now. Intense malice filled up Jinwoo's eyes. He began walking towards Huang Dong-suk. What the heck? Huang Dong-suk and his goons had been surrounding the scared Eugene Ho, so they ended up discovering Jinwoo rather belatedly. What's going on here? He's still alive. But Gyuhwan Hyung looks like a dead fish, though. What embarrassment this is. He's a measly rank E, you know. Huang Dong-suk scratched his chin. Hey, Gyuhwan, why didn't you finish him properly the first time? Zhou Gyuhwan's face reddened somewhat. Yeah, I should have. But this wasn't right. He really did pour his all with that shot. He had spent over a third of his overall magical energy. Yet how could this kid stand back up? Could the attack not connect properly? But then, there wouldn't have been such a loud explosion if that was the case. Lots of questions formed in his head, but there was no time to ask them. Because Jinwoo opened his mouth first. Since you're playing around with people's lives. The eyes of Huang Dong-suk's group were now fixed to Jinwoo. He came to stop in front of them. Eugene Ho flinched in surprise, but the reactions of other hunters were rather subdued. Some of them even began smirking in derision. Jinwoo spoke with a dry voice. You've all sufficiently resolved yourselves, right? Huang Dong-suk let off a snort after hearing that. What the hell is this fool even saying? Hyung-nim, let me handle this kid. A hunter with tiny little eyes approached Jinwoo and placed his arms around the latter's neck. It looks like your mister hasn't really figured the situation out yet, but the thing is... The expression of the tiny eyes became weirder and weirder as he strengthened his arms. What the hell? Why can't I pull him down? He tried to perform a headlock with his physical strength, but no matter how hard he pulled, Jinwoo's upper body showed no sign of budging. Wasn't this be asterisk starred, supposed to be only a rank E? Cold sweat formed on the forehead of the tiny eyes. How could he be this strong? It happened then. Slice. The head of the tiny eyes fell to the ground. Thud. Jae Juntae. Huang Dong-suk's eyes trembled like an earthquake. Well, what the hell? That knife, just when did he... Where did he get that? Huang Dong-suk and his goons quickly took several steps back and yanked their weapons out. Jinwoo's hand was already holding the poisoned fong of Kasaka. Blood dripped from the tip of the blade. The number of enemies left to kill, 7. The number of killed enemies, 1. 7 left. Jinwoo swept his gaze at Huang Dong-suk and his group like a predator eyeing his prey. Huang Dong-suk swallowed his saliva. He was already pretty surprised by the dagger appearing in that man's hands. But more importantly, Park Juntae's death shook him to the core rather greatly. How did an E-rank hunter kill 8 D-rank in one hit? He had no idea what kind of trick the other guy used, but from now on, underestimating his opponent was definitely forbidden. No, he had to be very meticulous here. Huang Dong-suk gave a signal with his eyes to his side. Gyuhwan, hit him one more time. Zhou Gyuhwan lightly nodded his head. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Zhou Gyuhwan told himself, such as lights began gathering in his hands again. But Even before the arrows of light could leave his fingertips, Jin Woo appeared right in front of Zhou Guohuan first. Ah, huh. Zhou Guohuan's jaw hit the floor. The light in Jin Woo's eyes gleamed coldly. You first, the magic-type hunter who possesses strong firepower but a weak body. Jin Woo had finished his calculations already. The dagger stabbed straight through Zhou Guohuan's neck. Stab. Hio-heek. Zhou Guohuan tried to cover the hole in his neck and collapsed to the floor. Plop. Kill him. Yuwa. With that as a signal, the hunters around him rushed towards Jin Woo at once. Jin Woo raised all his senses to the maximum and calmly focused on the movements of his enemies. All sounds disappeared and time slowed down. The agility stat and its 38 points had begun displaying its worth. He then blocked or evaded swords, spears, and arrows being thrust at him from the very short distance. The eyes of the hunters became incredibly large. How can he rank move like this? Too fast. I can't hit him at all. The complexions of the hunters became ashen. Indeed, speed was a subjective thing. To their eyes, Jin Woo's movement was absurdly fast. Meanwhile, Jin Woo waited in among the hunters and calmly cut into their vital spots, one at a time. Effect: paralysis has been activated. Effect: bleeding has been activated. The special effects of the poison fong of Kasaka continued to activate, and the hunters all fell into a quagmire of confusion. I can't move my body. Yua. Magic. Was that magic? You son of a B*****. Kiak. What the hell is this guy's real identity? Yuwak. Screams resounded out without a break from here and there. 5 hunters surrounding Jin Woo all crumpled down to the floor in no time at all. Tearing. The number of enemies left to kill: 1. The number of killed enemies: 7. Jin Woo shifted his gaze over to the last remaining survivor. And that was none other the big bearded man, Huang Dong-suk. He discarded his shield as an expression of determination formed on his face. He then loudly roared out, "Yuha!" Huang Dong-suk kicked the ground and rushed forward. Thump, 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 thump. His mind raced as he ran forward. He was a tanker and was considered one of the top even within the C rank. His opponent most likely was a damage dealer. Although that man seemed to be very agile, judged from his quick movements, there was no way he'd possess enough power to penetrate past Huang Dong-suk's reinforcement skill. You can't fatally wound me with a measly little dagger. The one to be crushed when they collide would be Song Jin Woo. Instead, their distance closed up in the blink of an eye, and Huang Dong-suk tackled with his shoulder. Reinforcement. But then his entire world seemed to spin around, and before he realized how, he was staring at the ceiling of the dungeon. Slam! His brain shook hard, and a strong impact force was transmitted into his entire body. He wanted to get up, but his body didn't listen to his commands. Huang Dong-suk tried very hard, but eventually gave up and lay sprawled on the ground. Cough! He coughed out a mouthful of blood. Did he throw me down to the floor? Did Huang Dong-suk really lose in the contest of strength? In a battle of physical strength? How can a measly rank E? He was now so sure that something had gone terribly awry somewhere. 5 rank CS and 3 rank DS were knocked down in the blink of an eye. There was no way this B****-starred was a rank E. Jin Woo stood next to Huang Dong-suk. The bearded man couldn't even properly move his body. His fate was quite obvious now. If this was a sports match or a spar, then this battle would have ended right here. Too bad for the bearded man, though. Jin Woo wasn't planning to stop there. Wait a minute. Huang Dong-suk raised his hand first. Well, let me go. If you want money, they'll give it to you. As long as you spare me. 3 times. Jin Woo's voice remained cold. Aren't you a bit shameless, asking to be spared by someone you try to kill 3 times already? First, by blocking the exit of the boss room. Second, ordering Eugene Ho to kill him. And finally, Zhou Guohuan's magic. Huang Dong-suk tried to kill Jin Woo these 3 times even after excluding the battle just now. Give and take. When he returned alive from the underground temple, Jin Woo resolved himself to return as much as he had received. Whether it was kindness or hostility, he'd repay the acts of ill intent with an equal amount of malice. There would be no room for negotiation. Realizing that begging for his life wouldn't work, Huang Dong-suk's eyes shot wide open and foam bubbled around his mouth. You think you'll be okay after you laid your hands on me like this? Do you have any idea who my younger brother is? Shatter. Huang Dong-suk could no longer continue with his words after his neck was broken. Hyuk. The whites of the bearded man's eyes were showing now. The number of enemies left to kill, 0. The number of killed enemies, 8. Finally, this quest had come to an end. Phew Wu. Jin Wu spat out a long sigh containing a myriad of emotions and lifted his hand away from Huang Dong-suk's head. His gaze then stopped on his hands. He might have one-sidedly bulldozed past his opponents, but for someone who had fought to the death against 8 other people, his hands remained remarkably steady. Is it okay to be like this? Jin Wu placed his hand on his chest and felt for his beating heart. Thump, thump, thump. His heart was beating as calmly as if he had been taking a stroll. What if, for the first time ever, he began to think that seeing the system wasn't the only change taking place within him after he returned alive from the underground temple? However, his musings had to be kept brief. Soon, the familiar beep entered his head. You have completed emergency quest. Kill all the enemies. Completion rewards are now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Y/N. He was half expecting this to happen, and sure enough, he now had received rewards. Jin Wu didn't even hesitate and chose yes. Confirm. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. 10 additional stat points. Reward 3. Skill. Intimidation. Not only 10 points, but even a skill too? Jin Wu's eyes widened from the huge amount of available rewards. All those stat points were one thing, but this new skill stole away almost all of his attention. If I didn't possess the dash skill when fighting that spider, the only reason why he managed to hunt the boss down was because of dash. There was no need to mention how important a skill was during a battle. It was not for nothing that a rune stone, with which a person could learn a brand new skill, cost several hundreds of millions of won. Jin Wu immediately checked this skill called Intimidation out. Show me the third reward. Skill. Intimidation LV1. Active skill. Mana required to activate, 100. Can render a designated target in a state of fear for 1 minute by using your powerful aura. Multiple targets can be selected. Effect Fear. All stats minus 50%. Although it was only active for a short time, it was still a rare skill that could decrease the opponent's stats by a substantial amount. Of course, exactly like other effects, if the opponent's resistance was high enough, it would fail to activate. But if it did work, then Jin Wu thought that taking care of his enemies, regardless of who it was, would become as easy as pie. And since it could be used against multiple opponents, the scope of this skill's usefulness seemed limitless, too. It's really good, isn't it? The rewards were just as good as the potential penalty was as bad. Hang on a sec. Now that I think about it, it's not like that, is it? After all, his life was at stake here. And was that all? Jin Wu took a look around him. He frowned deeply after taking in the gruesome sight. He had witnessed enough deaths of other hunters, but even then, he'd never really get used to looking at the corpses of other people. This was what this quest asked of him, though. But for a quest that asked for many lives as its completion requirement, the rewards handed out felt rather cheap and not quite enough. Well, even if it weren't for the quest, he'd still have to fight against Huang Dong-suk and his crew in the end, but still. And they say, a man's greed knows no bounds. Jin Wu shook his head wryly. It was then the cave shook around once more. Rumble. The tremor had become stronger than before. It was now the time to get out of the dungeon. But before he could do that, there was something else he needed to take care of first. And that happened to be Eugene Ho. Jin Wu's gaze drifted toward him. Eugene Ho had been pitifully frozen solid in his spot until then, and flinched rather grandly before hurriedly lowering his gaze to the ground. Now, what should I do with this kid? Of course, he wasn't thinking of harming Eugene Ho. There was no need to, nor was there a reason to do so, either. However, if the events of this place got leaked out to the rest of the world, then there was a good chance that his life would become inconvenienced in a variety of ways. So, I guess I should make sure he doesn't talk, huh? Just as he thought that course of action would be for the best, Eugene Ho rapidly ran towards him, knelt down, and bowed his head. Hyungnim, please spare me. Suddenly, Jin Woo felt that the following conversation should unfold a lot more smoothly than his initial expectation. Eugene Ho was shaking like a wet dog. His complexion was pale as well. Well, 8 people died in the blink of an eye right in front of his face. That was par for the course, really. One of the most important tools in dealing with people was the fear. So, Jin Woo decided to use this situation to his advantage. Why should I? Hike. Jin Woo thought that he heard the sound of Eugene Ho's heart falling to the floor just now. His guilty conscience that asked, was that too much? Only lasted for a second, though. If you want money, I can speak to my father, and who do you think I am? Jin Woo's expression crumpled unpleasantly. Sure, he did grow up impoverished, but that didn't mean he was corrupt enough to hold a person's life hostage and extort money that way. Wouldn't he be no different from Hwang Dong-suk if he did that? I'm truly sorry. If it weren't for Eugene Ho's current state being absolutely terrified, Jin Woo would have smacked the back of the kid's head or something by now. He was holding back only because it looked like Eugene Ho might keel over from a heart attack if he really did that. Confirming how displeased Jin Woo's expression was, Eugene Ho nervously swallowed some dried saliva. Now that I think about it, even back when Hwang Dong-suk offered him money, could he have abandoned all material desires and now only walks the path of bloodshed and murder? Jin Woo's image inside Eugene Ho's head was being solidified in an even weirder direction. However, it was too early to draw a conclusion yet. If that was the case, then why did Hyungnim extract those magic crystals? Not too long ago, Jin Woo personally went and extracted all those magic stones, even going so far to dig through the spider's entrails. Sure, it was used in a variety of ways, such as a source of high-density energy, as a raw material in manufacturing magic tools, etc., but to a hunter, a magic crystal was simply another word for money. Eugene Ho's mind spun at a quicker pace. So that's how it was. Those crystals were the prize of blood. They were the deserved prize he earned through staining his hand with blood, and that was why he didn't mind digging through the stomach of a dead monster. Most uptod / it Velze / republished on in 0 Velbgen C/O/M. Had not show a hint of mercy to those enemies who try to harm him, but he was also the practitioner of the way of the blood, meaning he did not want anything to do with the monetary gain that he hadn't earned with his own hands. And I tried to buy his benevolence with money, so of course, he'd get P** set off at me. In that case, what Eugene Ho needed here wasn't father's money, but the deserved profit that could be earned if he managed to walk out of here alive. When he sneaked a glance, Jin Woo's expression was still distorted somewhat. Eugene Ho quickly continued on with his words. Hyungnim, if you spare me, then I'll hand over all the profit earned in this dungeon to you. As expected, Jin Woo immediately displayed his interest. Please, think about it, Hyungnim. If you monopolize the profit meant for 10 people after 9 others are killed, others would definitely start questioning you. From Eugene Ho's perspective, Jin Woo was, without a doubt, a fake registrant. Not only that, a highly skilled fake registrant who enjoyed murdering people. Obviously, had not want the attention of other folks landing on him. So what? On the flip side, if we both walk out of here alive, then according to the contract, all the magic crystals from this dungeon belongs to me. Even if all the other teammates had died, since you don't get a share in the first place, no one would suspect you. Of course, there was no way that Eugene Ho would be suspected of foul play here. Well, his father owned one of the country's top-ranked companies, after all. The potential profit Head earned from selling off the magic crystals would be like a pocket change to him. This money is something Hyungnim totally deserves. I mean, this is your deserved reward for saving me and getting rid of Hwang Dong-suk and his lackeys. Wouldn't you agree? Eugene Ho empathized the words deserved reward for some reason. Yeah, for sure. Certainly, that method was the safest way to dispose of the magic crystals. These crystals no longer had any owners. No matter how avaricious Hwang Dong-suk was, he still couldn't take them to his grave. That left just one person, Eugene Ho, as the sole claimant to the rights of these crystals. However, such a guy was saying that Head voluntarily offered them up. Jinwoo didn't want anything to do with them if they were to be taken away forcibly, but there's no reason for me to refuse things that are willingly entering my pockets. No, without his help, Eugene Ho would either have been killed by now or get dragged around as a hostage instead. When looked at that way, the claims of them being deserved reward made some sense. Seeing that Jinwoo's expression lighten up, Eugene Ho was now sure of his guesses being on the money. As I thought, the magic crystals are the deserved reward of blood for hunting down Huang Dong-suk and his gang. So he's not going to say no here. The meaning of the word deserved as imagined by these two men had what you'd call a significant difference, but they had no way of knowing that. Okay, as soon as Jinwoo agreed, Eugene Ho's face brightened up in an instant. Hell, Eugene Ho was even feeling a bit awestruck by how steadfast Jinwoo was with his personal beliefs. However, Jinwoo's face became emotionless next. However, how do I trust you? Jinwoo had recalled his initial goal once more. He wasn't trying to scare the kid, so he could line his pockets in the first place. No, he started this intimidation antics so he could avoid being inconvenienced later down the line. How can I betray you, Hyungnim, who saved my neck multiple times already? You could ignore our promise and just yap on to anyone you meet. No? Actually, it wouldn't be too big of a hassle if the kid did that. Killing Huang Dong-suk and his goons were 100% acts of self-defense, after all. There were 8 of them, not to mention they were fully armed as well. Heck, they even attacked first with a powerful magic spell, too. Laws had changed ever since the emergence of the hunters, so Jinwoo knew that he'd walk away scot-free only with that much justification. Jinwoo wanted to let things die down quietly in this manner, and Eugene Ho's help would be needed to facilitate that. There might be a slight problem with how he went about asking for that help, but as far as the end result was concerned, this was the best method available. So, speak up. Jinwoo stared at the other guy with eyes that demanded answers. Eugene Ho formed a determined, dignified expression. I will never do something so cowardly, Hyungnim, especially for someone who has saved my life. Hang on a minute. Jinwoo thought that he had seen those determined eyes from somewhere, before realizing that they were rather similar to back when Eugene Ho refused the suggestion of Huang Dong-suk to become their accomplice not too long ago. This kid, he's being serious. The give and take. When his life was hanging in the balance, Eugene Ho chose to stand with Jinwoo. He trusted Jinwoo and tried to go up against 8 other hunters. That was why Jinwoo decided to trust Eugene Ho at least once. Of course, not right away and not quite like this. Maybe after planting the fear of God into the kid first. Jinwoo reached down and picked up Huang Dong-suk's discarded shield. The back of my head is still aching from Huang Dong-suk's sneak hit, you know. Jinwoo pretended to study the shield from this way and that, before powerfully flinging it towards the wall of the cave. Kaboom! More than half of the shield got buried deep inside that wall. Cold sweat drops dripped down Eugene Ho's face as he nervously swallowed his saliva. I hope that my dongsing isn't going to disappoint me, too. But of course, Hyungnim. It happened then. The dungeon began shaking much harder this time. Rumblebly. Their time was clearly running out. Jinwoo never held any thoughts of harming Eugene Ho from the get-go, so he figured that this much would be enough. So, he ordered Eugene Ho, collect all the magic crystals. We're leaving. Thank you very much, Hyungnim. Eugene Ho stood back up and bowed his waist 90 degrees. A smile found its way back onto his face, too. While Eugene Ho went around to fill up the bag, Jinwoo began rummaging through Huang Dong-suk's pockets. I gotta get paid what's mine, too. He was promised 2 million won for the day's work, and he couldn't afford to let a single cent slip by. Huang Dong-suk's wallet was filled with lots of 50,000 won bills. When he counted, there were 45 of them. Just over 2 million, in other words. The bearded man promised to pay in cash as soon as the raid was over, so he must have had them ready, just in case. Because, well, he wouldn't have been able to cut the tail all the time. Thanks for the pay. Jinwoo said the words of thanks to no one in particular and left the boss room first. Eugene Ho was almost finished packing up the magic crystals, but then belatedly noticed that Jin Woo had disappeared and hurriedly began searching for him. Hyungnim. All he found were the rapidly cooling corpses of the hunters that lost their lives to Jin Woo. Hike. Yu Jin-ho and his deathly pale complexion hurriedly chased after Jin Woo, as if he was scared of being alone. The agent from the association's investigation department swiftly arrived at the location of the gate. The procedure to follow when there were casualties during a raid was rather simple. The remaining survivors only had to report the matter to the association and let the investigators do their job. That was all. The investigator for today was a strict-looking Ani. And your names are? It's Song Jin-woo. My name is Yu Jin-ho, ma'am. Hunters dying inside dungeons happened pretty much every single day, so this procedure was more like a formality at this point. To be more precise, it was now more to do with record-keeping. Actually, that was if there were nothing to be suspicious about. So, every rank C hunter in the raid team was killed, yet how did one rank D and one rank E manage to escape unhurt? The investigator questioned the duo while adjusting her glasses. Her glaring eyes narrowed to a slit. Now, normally, it'd be the weakest hunter in the team to die first, most of the time. Yet, she intensely scrutinized the two men before discovering something particular and raised her voice. Oh my gosh! Her eyes began sparkling as she approached closer. Isn't this the longsword Kallion that's been launched recently by the Maya Company? Oh my gosh! Isn't this one of the Royal Series shields crafted by the one and only master craftsman Greedos? Yu Jin-ho's face brightened immediately. You seem to be well versed in weapons, ma'am. Yeah, it's nothing to feel proud about, really. No, it's only on the level of browsing through the catalogs every now and then. Oh ho 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 ho. The price of the longsword was around 700 million, while the shield was around 500 million. TL. $620,000 and $443,000, respectively. These powerful armaments were crafted with magic crystals costing well over hundreds of millions of won, as well as other expensive materials, and they were capable of boosting the abilities of a rank D hunter past that of a rank C. With this revelation, the agent began imagining the events that had taken place inside the dungeon. With these types of armaments, a lone rank D hunter managing to hunt down the boss monster seemed rather feasible now, even when considering that all the rank C hunters have been annihilated along the way, and that rank E probably hid in a corner somewhere and barely saved his life. Of course, the reality was opposite of that, but in any case, she came to a conclusion. The odds of a man with enough financial wherewithal to purchase such armaments, stabbing his comrades in the back for a handful of magic crystals were low at best. On top of that, it was also impossible for a rank E to do anything to several rank C hunters too, so the deaths of Huang Dong-suk and 7 others could only be chalked up to an unfortunate accident. I understand what happened now. The investigator closed the case file with a satisfied face. The investigation will conclude with this, so you may go home now. I'm sure it had been a difficult day so far, so thank you for taking the time out to aid us with the investigation. Thank you for your hard work. Jin Woo said goodbyes on behalf of both men. The investigator and her car left just as quickly as they had arrived. You also worked hard, Hyungnim. Yu Jin-ho bent his waist 90 degrees once more. Even after they had exited the gate, Yu Jin-ho's overly polite attitude didn't change. He must have been pretty darn scared, even now. Jin Woo inwardly clicked his tongue. Yeah, you too. Well, I haven't done much anyway. You did most of the work, Hyungnim. Oh, here are your magic crystals. Yu Jin-ho very courteously handed the bag over to Jin Woo with 2 hands. And indeed, the bag was filled to the brim with magic crystals. The highest price a magic crystal from a rank C gate could fetch was around 10 million won. Even the smallest ones fetched several millions. Jin Woo's eyes scanned the number of crystals, and he inwardly cried out in elation. Just how much will these? He tried so hard to suppress a grin from breaking out on his face. It was then a drop of water suddenly fell inside the bag. Splash, splosh. Jin Woo raised his head. There were raindrops falling from the sky that had been gradually getting darker as the afternoon rolled by. It was a good thing, sending her off with an umbrella. Jin Woo formed a subtle smile while thinking about his little sister. Later in the evening, Jinwoo summoned his status window as soon as he arrived back home. Stats. Stats. Strength, 53. Stamina, 30. Agility, 38. Intelligence, 30. Perception, 32. Available points to distribute, 10. The 10 points he got as a reward from the emergency quest still remained, waiting. His entire body was itching from the desire to spend them. If he wanted to earn them through daily quests, then he'd have to spend the next 3 days and still had to find one more point from somewhere. And if he wanted to earn them through leveling up, then he had to raise it by 2. The priority is with agility, then perception next. He spent 7 points on agility, and the rest 3 on perception. Agility, 45. Perception, 35. Available points to distribute, 0. His stat values looked more even now. Agility had almost caught up with strength, and perception was already at 35. Once agility's values got closer to strength, he was planning to increase stamina next. Leaving alone the stat of intelligence and its unknown uses for the time being, he wanted to raise all of his other stats as uniformly as possible. Should I check out today's results? Name, Song Jinwoo. Level, 21. Class, none. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP, 2,600. MP, 390. Tiredness, 0. Stat, Skills. Passive skills. Unknown, LV Max. Tenacity, LV1. Active skills. Dash LV1. Intimidation, LV1. The level that had risen up by 3 and the new skill Intimidation caught his attention the most. And his stats also had received a healthy boost from the 10 extra points. These alone would qualify today's earning as quite spectacular. But there were more, weren't there? 2,000,001 I got for today's work, and .RA/LATSH/P/TERS on N/V//L/B/C//M, and all those magic crystals filling up the bag as well. Jinwoo counted the number of the crystals once more. 11 from a spider, and 38 from Huang Dong-suk and his lackeys. In total, 49 of them. If he asked 5 million for each, he'd still earn well over 200 million won. 200 mil from a single day's hunt. The profit that should have been shared by 10 people, 9 had been swallowed up by him, so the amount had no choice but to balloon up. This was the same thing as the unexpected kiss of Lady Luck landing squarely on his cheeks. All I have to do now is to sell these things. Selling magic crystals wasn't difficult. Since the demand was so high, when he put them up for sale, they would all sell out pretty quickly. The question was, though, where he should sell these. There were several cases of a direct trading between individuals, and guilds and corporations also bought them in large quantities as well. For his case, since there were so many of them, he figured that it'd be for the better to seek out the help of professionals, rather than try his hands on dealing with individuals or sell them online. Can't I just sell them to a store or something? It'd be so much more convenient for him if the store bought his crystals at their retail value, as it would with the Japdom. While thinking this and that, Jinwoo pushed the bag full of magic crystals to the corner of the room. And then he abruptly recalled one last fruit of today's labor. Right, the system said that I can start buying stuff from the store. Jinwoo immediately summoned the store. Although it wasn't much, all the gold he had saved up from the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon still waited for their turn inside his inventory until now. Buy. T-ring. Accompanied by the familiar beep, the list of purchasable items popped up in his view, and they continued to do so quite literally without an end. Everything from cheap potions and trinkets, all the way up to absurdly expensive defensive items and eye-catching weapons could be found here. There were so many items that could be bought with gold. It was pretty obvious, but the more expensive an item was, the better its options got. One of the best items available even cost as much as 10 billion gold. Whoa, 10 billion, is it? His current gold was just over 112,000. It was way too short to buy anything truly useful. But there was no need for him to fret here. Why? Because he had plenty of time on hand. I can buy any of these as long as I have enough gold, right? Jinwoo hummed to himself, and continued to browse through the list of really expensive items. There was one more reason to seek out instant dungeons now. Already, he couldn't wait to receive the prize of the daily quest for tomorrow, the random box. Part 11. Arrangement. 3 days passed by since the incident of the C-ranked gate. Gina came home early from school as it was Saturday today. As soon as entering the apartment, she began sniffing the air and hurriedly removed her shoes. Appa, what's going on here? Did you order fried chicken? Yeah, I ordered some takeaway to make sure it get here just in time for you. Wow, really? Jinwoo beckoned her while sitting by the dining table, causing Gina's eyes to open wider. She immediately ran towards him. Hiya, what's going on here? And you're a serial Scrooge, too. Did something good happen lately? Hey now, put down your school bag first, will you? Why is a girl so hot-headed? It's fine. This bag ain't that heavy, you know. And she was complaining not too long ago about her bag being too heavy and that she didn't want to carry an umbrella around. Jinwoo was scared, but couldn't really hide the smile creeping up on his face, asking me if there was anything good happening lately. Of course there was. The family's bank balance had swelled up from 800,000 won all the way to 180,300,000 earlier today. TL, just under $160,000. 180 million was from the sale of the magic crystals, and 500 grand was used for the month's rent. Still, 180 million. Just one raid, and he was able to get his hands on an absurd amount of money, totaling 180 million. He had been one for a while now, but this was the first time he felt like a real hunter. Well, this was the era where a casual mention of hunters instantly brought up the images of wealth, so that couldn't be helped. Also, the face of the employee at the Magic Crystal Exchange when Jinwoo went there with his stash was still so vivid in his memories, too. Did you hunt all these monsters? Things happened, and so it's something like that. Holy moly. How incredible. 49 C-rank magic crystals. The initial estimated price for the whole lot was just over 300 million won. But who knew that taxation would be so heartless? I gotta pay 40% as tax. Yes, when an individual is selling the crystals, 40% is taken as tax. However, when a guild is selling them, it's only 10%. Is there a reason why there's a reduction in tax for the guilds? Well, unlike freelancers and their teams, guilds must cooperate without question when they are ordered to mobilize, you see. Indeed, when he searched through his memories, he remembered hearing about both the agents from the monitoring division of the association and the White Tiger Guild coming to the location of the dual dungeon incident. Because they were receiving special treatments, guilds had to cooperate with the government and the association when they asked for help. The high tax rates caused Jinwoo to ponder his choices for a little bit. Should I just hold on to the crystals and sell them off after I enter a guild? But he made up his mind soon afterwards. By the time he entered a guild and started working for them, the main objects of conquest would be gates rated A and B. The magic crystals coming out from those gates would incomparably be more valuable than those from a gate rank C. And right now, he needed every cent he could get his hands. Besides, I can't just sign on with any OL guild out there just to decrease tax. Now, can I? Okay, fine. I will sell them. Asterisk. That's how he got his hands on 180 million. Just as Gina had implied with her question, the chicken and beer meal was to celebrate the big earnings sitting pretty in the family bank account right at this moment. Thank you for this meal. Gina sneakily reached towards the beer can, but then Jinwoo's finger powerfully flicked her forehead. Ouch! For you this. He then placed a can of cola in front of her. Hi. I was only joking, you know. Not minding Gina and her hands busy rubbing her reddened forehead, Jinwoo popped the lid open on the refreshingly cold can of beer and poured the contents down his throat. But then this happened. Tearing. Jinwoo couldn't help but react nervously when he heard the familiar beep. Why assist a message all of a sudden? Harmful substances have been detected. Effects of buff. Detox will now commence. 3, 2, 1. Detoxification has been completed. You detoxed harmful substances? Are you talking about alcohol? Jinwoo drank up the remaining beer in the can and popped open another just to make sure. Gulp, gulp. And the exact same messages appeared again. He had drank up 2 cans of beer in one go, but he couldn't feel one hint of drunkenness come over. Whatever this buff thing was, it was definitely working as intended. What's this? Jin Woo tilted his head. He had yet to meet a single hunter capable of throwing buffs around. Most of the hunters possessing such specialized skill sets all worked for large guilds. As he was affiliated with the association, there hadn't been a single opportunity for him to meet one so far. Even if someone sneaked a buff on me, surely the system would have notified me of it. In that case, there could only be two possibilities. Either he received the buff while he was unconscious, or got it before the system was active. Personally, he was more inclined towards the latter. Appa? What's wrong? Is it indigestion? You should have been more careful, you know. When Jin Woo's expression became serious, Gina asked him with a worried voice. Nah, it's just that I remembered something pretty urgent, that's all. Eat without me while I take care of this. Okay? Jin Woo headed back into his room. He then began rummaging through every nook and cranny of his memories, trying to figure out if he had missed anything, even if it was small. Suddenly, he recalled something. Every quest has rewards, even penalty quests. But there was one quest that I never got around to confirming the rewards, no? Jin Woo hurriedly opened the mailbox. At the time, he had no clue what the system was nor what rewards could mean, so glossed over them. But he definitely remembered reading the message that said he had met the conditions to clear the quest. His heart began beating faster and faster. Jin Woo eventually discovered the messages sitting right at the bottom of the mailbox. Congratulations on becoming a player. Read. Jin Woo's voice trembled as he spoke softly. Confirm. This system will support the growth of the player. Failing to comply with the system's instructions will result in potential penalties. Your rewards have been delivered. As he thought, there was the mention of rewards. The voice he heard back inside the underground temple clearly said these words. Completion requirements for the secret quest. The courage of the powerless has been met. A secret quest or not, it was still a quest, wasn't it? However, he hadn't checked what kind of rewards he had received until now. Back then, he thought that it was all a hallucination, didn't he? That will result in potential penalties. Would you like to confirm your rewards? Y/N. Yes. Rewards for the secret quest. The courage of the powerless. The blessings from the Grand Sorcerer, Kandiaru. The Grand Sorcerer Kandiaru has been deeply moved by your courage and has gifted you with a special spell. When accompanied by the blessings of Kandiaru, you'll get to enjoy a healthy and fulfilling life every day. Let there be a bright future laying in wait for the challenger. One-time effect, will to recover. All your damaged body parts will be recovered to their original state. Continuous effect, good health, and long life. You'll be immune to all types of diseases, poisonous substances, as well as all forms of status debuffs. During sleep, your recovery rate will increase exponentially. Only now, puzzle pieces fell to their places. That's why my leg was. It was all due to the quest reward that his sliced-off leg had reverted back to how it was before. Same thing for why he couldn't get drunk from a couple of cans of beer. Hang on. Am immune to all types of poison too? Jin Woo's eyes abruptly shot open real wide. If that was the case, then could it be? Jin Woo hurriedly extracted a certain item out from his inventory. Item: Poison Sack of Kasaka. Rarity A. Type: Medicine. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasaka. Can be found very rarely when hunting Kasakas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles. Affect the iron scales of Kasaka. 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect: damaged muscles. Strength -35. My muscles are supposed to get damaged because of the toxin, but wouldn't this detox buff resist that? There was only one way to find out. Jin Woo squeezed his eyes shut and drank the liquid contained within the pouch. Sticky, yucky liquid slid down his throat. The taste was oily and terrible, but he endured it. And they say what's good for you usually tastes bitter. When he finished drinking all of the poison liquid, messages popped up in his view. Harmful substances have been detected. Most uptod / Vels a / republished on N Euro Velbj and C / O / M. Side effect: damaged muscles has been nullified. Yes. Jin Woo clenched his fists real tightly. Still, he couldn't celebrate just yet so he quickly summoned his status window. Stats: Strength, 53. Stamina, 30. Agility, 53. Intelligence, 30. Perception, 36. Available points to distribute, 0. Reduction in physical damage, 20%. As he expected, there was no decrease in his strength stat. It still remained as 53 points. And then he saw the new stat called reduction in physical damage, too. Sure, it might be limited in the category, but it still was a marvelous stat that reduced all physical damage by 20%. Nice! Just as Jin Woo began celebrating the emergence of this new stat, Gina called out to him from the living room. Appa, you know a guy called Eugene Ho? He's looking for you. No way. He can't be the same Eugene Ho. Jin Woo quickly went to the living room and snatched the phone's receiver off his little sister. Hello, Hyung Nim, it's me. Eugene Ho. Really now? The voice coming from the other side sounded way too familiar. How did you get this number? There was a person I know working for the association. You see, you didn't want to answer your smartphone, so I had no choice but to call you at home like this. Details only. Oops, my bad, Hyungnim. But it's not something we can discuss over the phone. May we meet up somewhere, so I can tell you in person? Jin Woo tilted his head slightly. He still wants to meet me after going through such an ordeal. Hyungnim, I really gotta ask you for this favor. Please. What a weird kid this guy was. Jin Woo eventually agreed to spare 1 hour after Eugene Ho earnestly pleaded with him. The meeting place was a franchise cafe located not too far from Jin Woo's home. Even though it was a weekday, there were quite a few people inside the cafe, perhaps because they chose to meet right after the lunch hour. Hyungnim, over here. Eugene Ho greeted him rather enthusiastically. Before entering the cafe, Jin Woo focused his perception to the max, but he couldn't sense any other hunters inside the shop. At the bare minimum, this meeting wasn't for the purpose of revenge, it seemed. Although Jin Woo couldn't really remember doing anything that warranted such an ill will towards him and requiring a swift retribution. Jin Woo sat down on the other side of the table. Didn't think we'd meet again. There was a half-eaten ice cream on top of the table belonging to Eugene Ho. Eugene Ho spoke as he stood up. What would you like to order? Should I go and get you some coffee? No, it's fine. Eugene Ho looked a bit crestfallen for some reason as he sat back down. Jin Woo opened his mouth first. So what do you want? It was then. I'm telling you, this guy did it for real back then. It was so crazy, really. Jin Woo shifted his gaze over to his side. The table next to his was occupied by 3 burly students with rather thuggish faces hailing from some local athletic club or the other, and they were busy chatting to 3 girls. Jin Woo tried to get back to his own conversation. As I was saying, what do you, and when did I ever do that? Will you listen to this be *starred, busy inventing rubbish, because we're in front of girls? Want from me? But you said it, didn't you? Wow, should I show you the pics, man? Should I, release the evidence to the rest of the world or something? The voices of the male students got louder and louder, and the laughter of the girls was just as loud as well. When the noise became too loud to carry on his own conversation, Jin Woo was left with no choice but to stand up and silently walk over to the table next to his. The eyes of the male students all focused on Jin Woo. Will you please keep it down? There are other people in here, too. One of the male students scratched the back of his head and pretended to apologize a couple of times. Yes. Well, keep it down. Very sorry about this. Girls began giggling hoarsely from that sight. Jin Woo quietly stared at them for a while before turning around. But when he did, something flew in and tapped him in the back of his head. A rolled-up paper serviette fell to the floor. Pwahaha. Kikik. Hey, you shouldn't do that. Male students began guffawing real hard, while girls pretended to scold the boys, even though mocking grins formed on their faces. Witnessing this scene, Eugene Ho's expression gradually froze up. Hiyu, Hyungnim. Jin Woo picked up one of the unused spoons next to Eugene Woo's ice cream and walked over to the counter. Oh, look. He's going to tell on his mommy. Mommy, they're making noise. Stop them, PLE foot. In the meantime, those kids kept running their mouths off. Jin Woo asked the nervous-looking female employee behind the counter with a deadpan face. How much for this spoon? And my apologies, dear customer. We don't sell spoons separately, you see. It's not more than 10,000 won. Yes? Pardon? I guess so. Jin Woo placed a 10,000 won bill on the counter and turned around. Dear customer? Excuse me, customer? Jin Woo ignored the calls of the female employee and headed straight to the table where the male students from some athletic club were. When they noticed that Jin Woo was displaying a suspicious behavior, the three students slowly stood up from their seats. What do you want now? What? The attention of everyone inside the cafe was now focused on this table. Jin Woo showed the students his spoon. Just as question marks floated on the expressions of these hapless kids, Jin Woo began squashing the spoon in his hand, and the poor thing easily lost its shape right in front of their eyes. The complexions of the male students grew paler and paler. Jin Woo then placed the spoon on their table. But what was left there could no longer be called a spoon anymore. No, it was just a piece of folded metal, roughly shaped like a ball. Heek! The male students nervously swallowed their saliva. That's not a human strength. This guy, he's a hunter. The male students signaled to each other before the kid who threw the serviette at him bowed and apologized for real. I'm really sorry. The rest of his friends then started apologizing as well. I'm sorry. It was our fault. Forgive us. The male students bowed several times with pale complexions before making their hasty retreat from the cafe while dragging the girls out as well. Hooray dash! The customers surrounding that noisy table sent gazes filled with appreciation towards Jin Woo. Meanwhile, Jin Woo returned to his seat and settled back down. Jin Ho's eyes sparkled as he spoke up. As expected of you, Hyung Nim. Enough. Jin Woo got back on topic at hand. Why did you ask me for a meeting? Well, Hyung Nim, I gave this matter a lot of thought. I mean, lots and lots of thought, you know? But I think I really seriously must ask you. What are you talking about now? Hyung Nim, actually, Jin Ho's face reddened as if he was embarrassed about something, before he summoned up his courage and spoke up. Actually, I was thinking of forming my own tea. Jin Woo didn't even hesitate 1 second and replied, I'm not interested. Part 1. Transaction. Jin Ho's expression became dumbfounded. Already, Hyung Nim, I don't need to hear the rest to figure out. Jin Woo was quite decisive in saying no. This wasn't because he didn't like Jin Ho or something like that. Although he seemed a bit off in the head, his attitude remained courteous, and he came across as someone who'd always keep his word. He was quite different from other signs of chaebols often seen in mass media. TL, chaebols, wealthy owners / families of corporations. However, Jin Woo was not interested in becoming a playmate of the son of a wealthy family during the boys hunter phase. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Hiyu Hyung Nim. Just as Jin Woo got up to leave, Jin Ho hurriedly reached out and held on to him. Hyung Nim, only for 20. No, wait, please partner up with me for the next 19 times. For what? To clear dungeons? Yes, it'll definitely compensate you properly. Jin Ho's voice sounded rather desperate. Jin Woo tilted his head slightly. There were two reasons why people became hunters. Either it was for money or for their sense of duty. But Jin Ho didn't belong to either camp. Maybe it was possible that he thought of being a hunter was a slightly more dangerous form of extreme sports or some such. That was what Jin Woo had been believing until now. True, he was taken aback slightly when the kid declared that he wanted to form his own private raid team, even after going through that ordeal the last time. There are all sorts of people in this world, that's for sure. It wouldn't be too strange to find a scion of a wealthy family who had become numb to the safe environment he had grown up in. However, Jin Ho's expression seemed far too serious and determined at the moment for that kind of an explanation. Could there be a different reason? Rather than the promise of proper compensation, Jin Woo's curiosity was being tugged by the idea of raiding dungeons 19 more times. Jin Woo's brain quickly kicked into gear. Hang on. Let's say that last time was his first raid. And when he completes 19 more raids, then, could this kid be aiming for? It didn't take long for Jin Woo to realize the truth. His expression became dumbfounded. Instead, are you perhaps thinking of getting the Guildmaster license? That's correct, Hyung Nim. What a smart decision it was not to order coffee. Otherwise, he might have sprayed the bitter liquid all over the table by now while trying to drink it. You want to become a guild master. Well, the story's a bit complicated there, Hyungnim. Eugene Ho's face reddened considerably compared to before as he spoke. Hyungnim, please listen to my story. Jin Woo was in a slight dilemma, wondering what he should do now. But in the end, he was defeated by his curiosity, so he sat back down. Fine, I'll listen. Well, the promised hour had not ended yet, so there was that too. It wouldn't be a problem to listen to the kid's story anyways. Eugene Ho hurriedly parked his, but backed down as well. As you've correctly guessed, I want to acquire the Guild Master license. Acquiring that license was not that difficult, actually. You had to be a hunter who participated in at least 20 raids. As long as you met this base requirement, all you had to do was to pass a written test, and you'd get the license. Of course, nobody would join the guild created by a rubbish hunter, and if a guild failed to maintain the minimum number of members, it'd be disbanded as well. Eugene Ho continued on. It's not public knowledge yet, but actually my father is trying to establish a guild of his own. A guild created by Eugene Construction? Yes. Eugene Construction was one of the biggest corporations in South Korea. It had expanded its business well beyond the fields of construction and into other sectors and had been making a killing there. Jin Woo had heard that recently they reaped huge profit after jumping into the hunter-related businesses as well. And they want to form a guild of their own? When Jin Woo displayed a hint of interest, Eugene Ho became excited and added more explanations. Head scout strong hunters and build a massive guild and place all our hunter-related business interests under it. That's his plan. If a corporation wished to partake in hunter-related businesses, then it was a necessity to work together with a guild. Well, you'd need the strength of a large guild if you ever wanted to get your hands on magic crystals and remains of the monsters, or treasures such as mana stones found in gates ranked A or B. And so, you wish to become a self-sustaining entity. Is that it? That is absolutely correct, Hyungnim. With the financial wherewithal of Eugene Construction, creating a guild wouldn't even pose a problem. No, the real issue would be with just who gets to run it. My father is thinking of hiring an S-ranked hunter as the guild master and placing my older brother as the vice master and run the guild that way. But Jin Woo immediately caught on to what Eugene Woo was implying here. If things were done that way, then a source of worry would be created along the way. The power of authority the guild master wielded was simply far too great. Even if it was the vice master who had hired the master, in case of a conflict arising between the two, there was a very good chance that the latter would end up completely overtaking the entire guild. In order to prevent that, there was only one way. All you had to do was to hire a master who'd never ever betray the one who hired him or her. For instance, brothers or even his son. And the chairman of Eugene Construction, Yu Myung-hwan, had a son called Eugene Ho. However, my older brother's business experience is far too good for me to simply take over the position of the guildmaster. It was his idea to enter the field of hunter-related business. You see, we gained huge profit in that sector because of him. His older brother had become a successful entrepreneur by the age of 31. Compared to him, Eugene Ho was only a 22-year-old university student, even if he possessed a unique plus point of being a ranked D hunter. Naturally, the chairman was thinking of entrusting the guild over to the eldest son. The eldest couldn't become a master since he was not a hunter, but he still knew a lot about the hunter-related businesses and also managed to achieve great success in the sector, too. Meaning, even if there was an element of a risk, the chairman would still take the chance. And you wish to change your father's mind by acquiring the master license, yeah? That's right, Hyungnim. And so, Jin Woo figured out why Eugene Ho was here, trying desperately to reel him in. Even if the kid hired a high-rank hunter and acquired the license that way, it'd be no different from buying it with cash. However, what if the kid succeeded in 20 raids with low-ranked hunters, such as Jin Woo, and acquire the license that way? Eugene Ho would be able to persuade his father. Simply him being able to lead a group of hunters would be enough to get his approval. That was what Eugene Ho was counting on. If Eugene Ho became the guild master, they would get an S rank as the vice master and scout all the talented hunters. Well, others would only feel secure and join them if one or both master and vice master spots were filled by someone with powerful abilities. If this plan were to come to fruition, then completing those 20 raids was an absolute must. Hyungnim, please help me. I have no one but you, Hyungnim. Yu Jin-ho bowed his head. If it weren't for Jin-woo, the kid would have died during his very first raid. By the giant spider, or at the hands of Hwang Dong-suk. 2 times. Yu Jin-ho needed a trustworthy ally here. I can definitely trust Hyungnim. He might be a cold-hearted person who would not bat an eyelid when killing his enemies, but he also happened to be a righteous man who would not treat lightly the lives of those weaker than him. And just as important, he didn't care about getting his hands on ill-gotten gains as well. Jin-woo was the perfect candidate. However, Jin-woo didn't need Yu Jin-ho. That was why he asked the kid, "What will I get in return then?" Yu Jin-ho raised his head, his expression one of joy, as he quickly produced an envelope he had prepared earlier on, and a blueprint of a building came out from there. Jin-woo took a look at it. This is the guild office building we're constructing at the moment. The expected retail price of the building is around 30 billion, but ITLL definitely rise up in the future. Although the association was doing their best to manage them, there would always be that fear of monsters escaping from the dungeons. That was why the land price near the association headquarters or around large guilds always rose up higher as time went by. Well, there would be no more precious wealth than one's own life, after all. Even if it was a small guild, being near one almost guaranteed your safety. However, if it was a building occupied by a large guild, there was no need to mention it. If I become a master, then for exactly 1 year, you'll use it until the guild has been stabilized. And then, hand over the deeds to you, Hyungnim. Of course, they'll make sure all the paperwork are in order so there wouldn't be any unnecessary complications later down the line. A 30 billion building for rating rank C gates 19 more times. Jin-woo smirked slightly. As long as you become the master, ITLL all be worth it. Is that right? That's correct, Hyungnim. On that fateful day, Yu Jin-ho got to learn the valuable lesson of anything goes inside a dungeon. Hiring any OL hunters could lead to him getting killed. On the flip side, hiring famous hunters would mean Yu Jin-ho would lose the ability to persuade his father. However, Jin-woo was different. He was nominally a rank E hunter, yet he was strong enough to solo a C-ranked boss, as well as 8 C-ranked hunters without getting hurt. Hyungnim could be at least a B-ranked, or someone far stronger than that. With Jin-woo was around, rating 19 C-rank gates would not pose any problems at all. So, yes, if he could become the guild master, 30 billion sounded rather cheap in comparison. The only thing remaining was Jin-woo agreeing to do so. He wouldn't say no with this sort of terms on offer, right? Yu Jin-ho nervously studied Jin-woo's reactions. What should I do? In the meantime, Jin-woo was in a serious dilemma. 30 billion won. That was a huge amount of money. If one considered the fact that the winning prize of the local lottery was 1.5 billion won, he'd have to get lucky 20 times in a row to earn that amount. Not only that, the value of the building would only continue to rise up. If it were any other normal hunter, they would jump in with both feet and sign up right away. That's how tempting this offer was. However, Jin-woo was as far removed from being normal as anyone could ever hope to get. The one and only under the heavens. He was the only hunter who could grow stronger. If he continued on with quests and leveled up over and over again, had reached the S rank sooner or later, or even something surpassing that. If I could surpass the S rank, then 30 billion would be nothing. The contract fee for S-rank hunters went for several dozen billions already. No matter how famous a celebrity or a sports star was, they would never even come close to the worth of an S-ranked hunter. This was the era where the number of high-ranked hunters signified the strength of a nation. As a result, the treatment S ranks received exceeded one's imaginations. Considering that, what Jin-woo needed to prioritize here was not money, but his growth. And in order to grow, it'd be more convenient to be alone. Yeah, it'd be better to minimize the risks of unexpected events. If he hunted along with other people, the experience points received could decrease too. And because of all those eyes watching him, making a move would become rather cumbersome as well. Not to forget, in order to avoid anything troublesome happening down the line, he had to threaten Yu Jin-ho back then, something he didn't want to do in the first place. And finally, he'd have to match his schedule to that of the assault team from now on. The efficiency of his growth would only decrease, one way or the other. I can always make money later on. Although it was unfortunate, he had to decline this offer. Just as he thought like this. Hang on a sec. Suddenly, he came up with a pretty good way to catch two birds called money and growth with a single stone. If it's in this manner. When he finally raised his head, he spotted Eugene Ho and his nervous face. Jin Woo slowly opened his mouth. I only have one condition. Eugene Ho's expression brightened up instantly. Whatever it is, please tell me, Hyung Nim. I wonder, would you be able to smile even after I told you what it is? Jin Woo smiled inwardly and spoke up. You and I, only two of us will enter the dungeons. Pardon? Eugene Ho gasped out in pure shock. Hi, Hyung Nim. If I didn't make a mistake here, then, are you saying that Hyung Nim and I, just us two, will clear C-rank gates? Only us two. You didn't make a mistake, then. Eugene Ho's face was drained of all color, just then. Th. Most uptod / velze / republished on N0 velj C/O/M. Sure, Jin Woo was able to defeat the spider boss all by himself, so he'd be able to do something similar to other bosses as well. But when imagining only the two of them against the horde of monsters, just like back in that dungeon's entrance with those insects, Eugene Woo suddenly found himself unable to breathe. Eugene Ho became completely speechless, while Jin Woo formed an expression that said, I knew it. However, this is the best way. The best, in order to catch both birds. It'd be very hard to enter any freelancer-run raid teams as a hunter ranked E. From the very first day, he made up his mind to start making money in this profession. He was constantly reminded of this harsh reality. Either he had to give up entering dungeons with his qualifications, or he had to create his own raid team. However, this kid was volunteering to form one for him. Wasn't this a great opportunity, in other words? BB but Hyung Nim, you need at least 10 people if we want to enter CRA. I'm pretty sure you'd find plenty of willing people when you say you'd pay them just for showing up to fill up the head count. Time to put to good use what he had learned from Hwang Dong-suk, then. If there were hunters who didn't want to fight with their lives on the line, but were in urgent need of cash, they would surely jump in with both feet at this golden opportunity. Eugene Ho's expression became one of a scared cat, though. Wait, surely you're not suggesting that us two will kill every single monster inside a dungeon, all the way up to the boss, are you? In truth, it'd be only one person doing that, though. You got it. With this arrangement, Jin Woo would be able to prevent the potential worst-case scenario of someone stealing his experience points, and the only person next to him would be Eugene Ho, so he wouldn't even need to worry about other people watching him all the time as well. If it's like that, then he'll get to enjoy some serious power leveling, won't I? On top of that, after all the raids were done and dusted, he'd get a nice little bonus of a wonderful building rolling right onto his lap. The only thing remaining now was him persuading Eugene Ho, and as expected, Eugene Ho was very, very scared at the moment. Isn't that way too dangerous, Hyung Nim? You're only looking at it from one way and not the other. Jin Woo beckoned the kid to come closer, so Eugene Ho leaned forward. If no one else participates in hunting besides us, doesn't that also mean no one will get hurt, as long as we're okay? Oh, of course. For the first raid, you were like a third while being dragged along, so you couldn't do anything about the incident that had happened. But think about for the moment the ramifications of your own raid team, finishing up all 19 raids without a single casualty. Eugene Ho's eyes shot open right up. If that was the case, then persuading his father would become one level easier. Not only had he be a D rank hunter, but the record of being the leader of a team that successfully performed 19 raids without a single incident would be added on top as well. It'd be the definite proof of him being qualified to become the guildmaster. Nothing would be a better advertisement for himself than this, wouldn't it? Jin Woo studied Eugene Ho's expression and smiled in satisfaction. This kid, he's convinced now. From the word go, the person in need was Eugene Ho. As for Jin Woo, he didn't really need to go on a raid with Eugene Ho, but still could enter dungeons via the association giving him a call or through the random boxes. Eugene Ho's was thinking now. Although it was a bit scary, if he succeeded in pulling this off, then, just as Jin Woo had implied, there would be so much he'd get in return. When recalling the sight of Jin Woo displaying his absolutely overwhelming might in battles from last time, Eugene Woo realized that maybe there wasn't much to fret over at all. Eugene Ho finally made his mind up, albeit after some serious internal struggle. Well, do it your way, Hyung Nim. In that case, I'll search for suitable teammates. Very good. Jin Woo nodded his head. They had come to an understanding. Since he was still in front of Jin Woo, Eugene Ho stopped feeling nervous and tight-chested and displayed a bright smile. I managed to finally get Hyung Nim on my side. For some reason, he was not feeling too scared of the upcoming raids. A trustworthy comrade named Jin Woo had joined him, and it'd be a bit easier to form a raid team now, too. As Jin Woo had said, with the terms on offer, many would queue up in line just for a chance to participate. With this, I'm one step closer to becoming the master. Jin Woo also smiled brightly as well. Clean up as many C-ranked dungeons by myself, and level up as quickly as possible. The two men exited the cafe with satisfied expressions. After going their separate ways, Jin Woo ran back home. Well, he didn't know when the association would give him a call. After all, it had been over 10 days since he was discharged from the hospital, so it would not be so strange to hear about a gate opening up in the vicinity. The association normally summoned hunters 2-3 times a month to clear dungeons that appeared within this area. One of the main reasons why he only gave 1 hour to Eugene Ho was that the call from the association could come at any time. For the time being, I can't afford to miss even a rank E dungeon. He wanted to kill lots of monsters and raise his levels quickly. How inconvenient it was not to have his smartphone around. What a relief that the new one should arrive in a few days' time. Jin Woo pushed open the front door and entered. The apartment was quiet. It was in the middle of the week, so his little sister was still at school. After confirming that there was no one at home, Jin Woo opened the window, displaying the daily quest. I should get today's rewards. Before he went out to meet up with Eugene Ho, he had finished the day's daily quest already. But there were too many eyes watching, so he had no choice but to delay receiving his rewards. Well, he couldn't really show off the sight of a blue light wrapping around his body, as well as a box suddenly popping out from nowhere in the middle of the street. Now, could he? Tearing. Daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Press up 100 times. Complete 100 out of 100. Sit up 100 times. Complete 100 for 100. Squat 100 times. Complete 100. Running 10 kilometers. Complete 11 tenths. You've completed daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Completion rewards have arrived. Would you like to confirm? Y/N. Yeah. Oh, hold up. Wait. Just like usual, Jin Woo was about to receive his rewards, only to spot something strange and hurriedly stopped himself. His gaze stopped dead and remained fixed to the column of running. At first, he thought that he ran 1 kilometer more than necessary. However, the longer he thought about it, the stranger it seemed to him. I filled up my quota, so why did it keep recording the extra distance? Jin Woo's gaze became sharper. Was this really nothing more than coincidence? Jin Woo got down to the floor and supported his weight on his arms. And then, his body rose up and down without a break. However, his sight was fixed to the seemingly empty air in front. You've completed 1 press-up. Press up 100 times. Complete 111/100. Press up 100 times. Complete 112/100. As I thought, running wasn't the only category that reflected the extra number of exercises performed. The count for press-up also kept climbing up. Suddenly, he became rather curious just how much higher the numbers would count to. Veins bulged on Jin Woo's arms. Thanks to his enhanced stats, he couldn't feel his weight. Actually, his body felt as light as fuzzy hair. Before long, the number hovering near the 100 mark climbed to 200. Press up 100 times. Complete 200/100. The count stopped for sure at the 200 mark. He performed a few more press-ups just in case, but it didn't want to go up any higher. Both the sit-up and the squat also stop counting at the 200 mark. Press up 100 times. Complete 200/100. Sit up 100 times. Complete 200/100. Squat 100 times. Complete 200/100. 200, no more and no less. It wasn't just climbing up without an end. And no, it wasn't as if the 100 mark was the end. There definitely was something here. His gut feeling was declaring as such. What if there was another result waiting for him once he completed all the overcounting? Let's make sure. With much faster steps than usual, Jin Woo exited the apartment. The next 9 kilometers for the running column were filled up really quickly. When Jin Woo arrived before his home once more, a new message popped up in his view. You've completed Hidden Quest, preparations to become strong. The title of the quest hadn't changed, but the type of the quest had changed to Hidden Quest now. His suspicion was proved to be correct. Jin Woo swallowed his saliva. Confirm. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. All stats plus 3. Reward 3. 1. Blessed Random Box. Or 2. Cursed Random Box. Would you like to collect them all? All stats raised by 3. His eyes shot open wide. The rewards from the Hidden Quest proved to be really exceptional. With all the stats getting a 3-point boost, it was the same thing as his level rising up by 3. No, wait, his stats might have risen, but since his level stayed the same, he had gained even more. Because with higher stats, raising his level would become that much easier. But at the same time, he felt a bit fearful as well. On one hand, he couldn't help but hold a vague hope that, from today onwards, all the daily quests coming his way could be converted to hidden quests instead. However, if the reward are this big, then the odds of the daily quests coming to an end were incredibly high as well. Also, if the hidden quest was something only available for just this once, then that meant he had to be extra careful when choosing the third reward. This would be his first time having to choose his reward. If he chose one, then he'd lose the other one. So, I wouldn't be able to see one of the two forever, is that about right? Just taking a single look at their names, it was rather obvious which one he needed to select. But this also could be a trap as well. Collect the third reward. You must choose between one of the 2 available random boxes. Blessed Random Box. Presents the player with the item he wants. Cursed Random Box. Presents the player with the item he needs. Which one will you choose? Their explanations were exceedingly simple, and that made choosing even harder. If there were no explanations to begin with, he'd have chosen the Blessed Random Box in a heartbeat. But now that he had read the dang explanations, it felt like he'd still end up missing out regardless of which one he chose. A thing that I want and a thing that I need. Just from those explanations, both of them sounded like a good deal. But there's definitely a trap here. The thing he wanted would be something he wanted because he recognized its usefulness to his current situation. However, the thing he needed might not necessarily be like that. Something that he may need, but didn't want to come out instead. For instance, when needing a powerful weapon, he might end up getting a horrifying bomb that could completely blow himself and all his teammates into smithereens in one go. That's why it's called the Cursed Random Box, right? So, he'd go with a lower risk selection. In situations where the end results of a choice weren't known, this would be the wisest way to minimize the amount of regret felt later on. Jin Woo finally made his decision after a cool-headed weighing of pros and cons. Blessed Random Box. A small box slowly materialized in front of his feet. Jin Woo picked it up. Could it be? His heart began beating faster and faster, because the size of the box was rather familiar to him. His hands ripping open the box became far more urgent. As I thought, Jin Woo's eyes grew wider. There was a golden key inside the box. Indeed, it was the key to an instant dungeon, the one had been anxiously waiting for. The information on the key appeared soon afterwards. Tiering. Item. Key of the Demon's Castle. Rarity S. Category, key. A key that will let you enter the dungeon. Demon's Castle. Can be used at the Daesung Tower located in Songpa-gu, Seoul. It's an S? Jinwoo raised his voice in surprise. Of course, there was no guarantee that the rarity ranking had any bearings on the difficulty of the dungeon. But he couldn't think of it any other way. The rarity E key opened a dungeon that was on par with a gate ranked E. After all, what would he do if the difficulty of the instant dungeon turned out to be S then? Even with a raid team consisting solely of S-rank hunters, there was no definite guarantee that such a dungeon would be cleared. The odds were around 50:50. The difficulty of a gate exploded upwards past the rank B, and even when looking through the entire world, there had been too few cases of S-rank gates opening up in the world. One of them appeared on Jeju Island, though. Afterwards, the island of Jeju became an abandoned hellhole where no humans could exist. Jinwoo stared at the key in his hand for a long while. This is what I really wanted? If there was one silver lining to be found here, then that would be the explanation saying He'd be able to enter the dungeon with this key, unlike the previous one, which said He'd be transferred instead. The implication being that he could escape at any time if he felt like it. Even if the key suddenly vanished from him, he still had the return stone from the last dungeon waiting to be used inside his inventory as well. He was no longer worried about getting trapped behind an invisible wall like the last time. I worked hard to earn this chance, so I can't throw it away like that now, can I? He simply had to confirm right away with his own two eyes whether this was what he really wanted or not. Part 2. Demon's Castle. In front of the Daesung Tower. A super tall skyscraper over 100 floors tall was standing straight as if to pierce the heavens above. Indeed, this was what the modern skyscraper should look like. Just looking up at it made him feel extremely dizzy. There were only a few people walking around, as it was already late evening now. The streets with not one soul on it gave off an eerie vibe. Still, I can't be sure, so Jinwoo took a good look around him, before pulling up the hood attached to his top to hide his face. If someone saw a person disappearing and appearing again in thin air without a gate around, that might cause a bit of ruckus. Not only that, there were several CCTV cameras installed here and there in the near vicinity, so it wasn't such a bad idea to avoid being too conspicuous. Actually, there was someone busy eyeing Jinwoo right at that moment. Who could that kid be? To think there would be a straggler wearing a hoodie busy loitering around the building at this time of the night. The security guard watching on from inside the building found Jinwoo's behavior rather suspicious and stood up from his chair. However, as this guard walked towards the door, he couldn't help but come to an abrupt stop and his eyes opened up real wider. Well, what the heck? The security guard gasped out in a surprise and hurriedly ran outside. The man was definitely walking towards here, yet he had vanished from the view, just like that, utterly without a trace. The security guard searched around his vicinity, but he couldn't even spot an ant here. He tilted his head this way and that before turning around. Well, OB, what a baffling thing that was. The security guard was about to go back inside the building, but then caught something in the corner of his eyes and turned his head to see what it could be without thinking. You walk. He cried out in shock as he fell hard on his butt. What the heck is going on here? The security guard cried out with a pale face. A person's disembodied hand floating in the air then vanished once more. Asterisk. Jinwoo retracted his hand. It's connected to the outside world. Unlike the last time, there was no invisible wall blocking his exit. The key also didn't disappear and remained tucked inside his pocket. If he wanted to, he could get out of here at any time, in other words. Now that I'm finished with confirming the escape route. Since he didn't know whether the rarity of the key equated to the difficulty of the dungeon, he was far more cautious than usual. Jinwoo pulled the hood back and took a look behind him. It was a sight shocking enough to make him groan. Just now, when he was taking a few steps towards the Daesung Tower, the world in front of his eyes transformed in an instant. Could this place even be called a dungeon anymore? A completely different world was waiting for him. Instead of the vanished Daesung Tower, a massive tower-like structure stood there. Wait, is that really a tower, or should I call it castle? Instead, a tower rising up high into the air without an end wrapped in reddish-black flames. It was as if the tower wasn't burning, but it was spewing out billowing flames instead. A burning tower, huh? Rather than the name of Demon's Castle, maybe that nickname suited it better. Jinwoo slowly walked towards this burning tower. Crackle. Pop. The closer he got, the louder the noises of flames rampaging around grew. Can I even enter this thing in the first place? However, even if he did, there was yet another problem to consider. Just like the last instant dungeon that was based off on the subway station, there was a good chance that, since this dungeon was based off on the Daesung Tower, he'd have to climb up 100 floors to clear it completely. He couldn't even begin to imagine just how long that would take. Jinwoo's steps came to a halt. He sensed a strong aura near the entrance. He slowly surveyed the surroundings and spotted a black life form the size of a bull huddled in slumber right in front of the doorway. Jinwoo carefully summoned the Poison Fong of Kasaka. Tiering. Item. Poison Fong of Kasaka. Rarity, C. Type, dagger. Attack plus 25. A dagger fashioned from the Poison Fong of the Kasaka. There are traces of the Kasaka's poison on it, so when attacking, it will cause paralysis and bleeding status effects. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Status effect paralysis. The target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect bleeding. The target's stamina will be reduced by 1% per second. Its attack power wasn't all that high, but the greatness of its added effects was proven in real battles time and time again. It'd be nice if the paralysis works and I get to kill it easily. Jinwoo walked as quietly as possible while approaching that creature. However, it was impossible to fool the olfactory senses of a monster. Soon enough, the creature sniffed the air and raised its body up. Che! Jinwoo clicked his tongue. The creature stood up completely, and all three of its heads turned in Jinwoo's direction. Hell's Gatekeeper, Cerberus. It was a huge dog possessing 3 heads. The name written in red letters floating on top of its heads immediately drew his attention. It was proof that the monster's level was very high. Since it's red, does that mean it's around the same level as those centipedes from the penalty zone? Back then, he managed to barely run away from the centipedes. Well, he was only level 1 back then, so it couldn't be helped. But it's different this time. He had grown stronger quite quickly during a short space of time. Without a doubt, that black creature was strong, but still, it didn't come across as truly overwhelming. His enhanced, alert perception was telling him that he could do this. It wasn't for nothing that he raised his perception stat. He kept on investing points to this stat so he could easily tell whether he should fight or take flight in cases like this. Growl. The Cerberus sensed the enemy and bared its fangs to threaten him. Jinwoo's gaze then wandered off to the creature's tail. It kind of resembled a whip, and its end was enveloped in flames as well. Jinwoo's eyes sharpened in an instant. Fangs and a tail. At the bare minimum, 2 methods of attack, huh? Jinwoo swallowed his dry saliva. The Cerberus slowly closed the distance before stopping right in front of him and began studying him for some reason. Is it looking for an opening? Just as he thought that, the monster attacked him. Roar! Jinwoo's eyes opened much, much wider. Too fast. Jinwoo barely evaded the Cerberus fangs by sliding underneath the leaping monster. The Cerberus landed back on the ground and spun around, before began biting at him with its 3 heads. Woof! Bark! Roar! The sharp fangs gleamed coldly in between the biting snouts. Title: Slaughterer of Wolves buff effect has activated. Title: Slaughterer of Wolves. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. TL. Again, the hunter is a lowercase here because it literally means someone who hunts, while the hunter's up until now had been written in English and is a specific job title of those who hunt monsters from dungeons. He sensed his body getting lighter. Nice. Jinwoo quickly retreated and wielded his dagger at the Cerberus as it continued to stick close to him. Swish! Swish, swish, swish! Clang! Cling, clang! Clang! The dagger collided with the fangs and issued loud noises. The blade moved at a blinding pace. Yet all he could do at the moment was to deflect the Cerberus attacks, and nothing else. Even after I buffed up, it's still this strong. The Cerberus agility had easily exceeded his imaginations. In order to overturn this situation, Jinwoo activated his intimidation skill. Intimidation has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Jinwoo's eyes widened. It didn't work. It was at that moment that the long tail of Cerberus flew in like a whip. Whoosh dash! Jinwoo reflexively ducked his head lower and evaded the tail. But that caused his legs to stop moving for a second. And the monster didn't miss this opportunity. One of its heads powerfully bit into Jinwoo's left shoulder. You will hack! Jinwoo summoned all of his strength and stabbed the dagger into the middle of the biting head. Stab! Effect! Paralysis has been activated. Effect! Bleeding has been activated. Whimper! The Cerberus cried out and let go of him. Thankfully, he was able to minimize the damage done before other heads had the chance to join in on the attack, but his left shoulder was now in tatters. What a scary biting power that was. He tried to move his left arm, but it didn't want to budge. Jinwoo's expression crumpled unsightly. He managed to wound the Cerberus, but when comparing the severity of their injuries, then it was clear that he came off far worse in that exchange. If either of paralysis or bleeding worked, the situation would have been different by now. Jinwoo glared at the Cerberus and clicked his tongue. Then, something else happened. Huh? The eyes of the Cerberus were being dyed in a crimson color all of a sudden. Gruel. Inexplicably, Jinwoo sensed something ominous was about to happen. What could it be? Hell's Gatekeeper Cerberus is using skill, Rage. Its state of rage will persist for the next 3 minutes. All of Cerberus stats will be increased by 100%. Cerberus will no longer feel pain. Jinwoo cried out. What did you just say? A monster just used a skill. In that instant, the Cerberus leaped off the ground. F***CK. Even before he could react, the Cerberus appeared right before his eyes. He hurriedly swung his dagger, but it only managed to graze the side of one of its heads. And all 3 heads bit into Jinwoo simultaneously. Kwajik! Yuhyuk! Jinwoo gritted his teeth. His neck, waist, and thigh all got bitten. The Cerberus ran at its top speed and slammed Jinwoo against the castle's gate. Slam! Jinwoo's HP hit the rock bottom in an instant. Kyohik. HP. 411/3-602. Your HP has decreased below 30% and skill, Tenacity, has been activated. All damage received will be reduced by 50%. Thanks to the damage reduction and the Tenacity passive, he was able to avoid getting killed in one hit. Cool. Jinwoo's eyebrows shot up in anger. It'd be easy to go mad from pain and wildly thrash about, but he'd lose this great opportunity, which would most likely never happen again. Losing his consciousness now would mean his end. Point 178, 179, 180. Jinwoo had been bitterly waiting for the end of the 3-minute duration and finally revealed his hidden trump card. The first reward, give it to me now. He immediately collected the first reward from the daily quest he had saved up until now. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition has been applied. So whoosh. A blue light enveloped him and all depleted health reverted back to full. HP. 3-602/3-602. Even his tattered left arm was healed as good as new in the blink of an eye. This is my chance. Jinwoo's eyes gleamed coldly. In such close proximity, no matter how agile this monster was, it'd not be able to dodge his attacks. Jinwoo rapidly caught one of Cerberus' necks with his left arm and stabbed the poison fang of Kasaka in the middle of that neck. Stab! 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 The rage state had ended by now, and the Cerberus began to violently thrash about trying to escape from Jinwoo's embrace. Whimper! Whine! However, Jinwoo did not let go and held on with his powerful arms. The harder the Cerberus struggled, the stronger he gripped the neck of the monster. In the meantime, his dagger continued to stab into the creature's neck. Stab, stab, stab! Whimper dash! The Cerberus bit into Jinwoo as it struggled to the bitter end, but the battle had already been decided by then. Stab! Stab! Whimper! Wine. The poison fang of Kasaka now traveled lower down from the neck and stabbed the Cerberus' chest. Soon enough, the monster's resistance became noticeably weaker and weaker. Whimper. In the end, the heads of the Cerberus fell to the side, lifeless. Tearing. You have defeated Hell's gatekeeper, Cerberus. Level up. In one breath, his level rose up by 4. That was how difficult this battle was. Jinwoo only let go of the Cerberus' neck after confirming its body going limp with his own eyes. The heavy body sprawled to the floor without any resistance whatsoever. Plop. Jinwoo rested his hands on his knees. Only now could he breathe a sigh of relief. A monster that could use a skill if he didn't prepare a hidden trump card, then had have been killed for sure. A chill crawled down his spine just from thinking about it. Oh, I almost forgot. Items. Would there be as many rewards befitting his life or death struggle to bring down this monster? After calming himself down, Jinwoo reached out towards the Cerberus. You have discovered item, Gatekeeper's Necklace. Take it. You have discovered item, Key to the Castle's Gate. Take it. You have discovered item, Cerberus Molar, X3. Take it. Take them all. A steel necklace originally found around one of the Cerberus necks, a gray key, and 3 molars of a monster appeared in his hand. Item, Gatekeeper's Necklace. Rarity A. Type, Necklace. Agility plus 20, Perception plus 20. Item, Key to the Castle's Gate. Type, Key. The key to unlock the gates of the demon's castle can only be acquired after killing the gatekeeper. Item, Cerberus Molar. Rarity, none. Type, Miscellaneous. Oh. Jinwoo's eyes went round. This necklace can boost both my agility and perception by 20 points? A necklace with eye-spinningly good options came out. Its rarity was also ranked A. Out of all the items had seen so far, this one featured the highest rarity ranking yet. Well, I had to go through so much to kill it, so. Indeed, there was no way that its rarity would be low. However, when it came to actually putting the necklace on, he couldn't help but to hesitate big time. The thing was, it was shaped like a roundish metallic choker with spikes spouting out in regular intervals. So no matter what it said on the cover, it was undoubtedly a dog collar. Jinwoo closed his eyes and deliberated on his choices for a long time before deciding to try it on at least once and brought the necklace closer to his neck. Then, a message popped up. Will you wear item? Gatekeeper's Necklace? Jinwoo fell into yet another bout of dilemma for a second, before helplessly muttering out his answer. Sure thing. It was then, the necklace slowly disappeared from his view. You're now wearing item, Gatekeeper's Necklace. Jinwoo hurriedly summoned his status window. Stats. Strength, 60. Stamina, 39. Agility, 80. Intelligence, 37. Perception, 67. Available points to distribute, 0. Reduction in physical damage, 20%. Holy *T. Both his agility and perception were increased by 20 for real. The option was now in effect, in other words. It seemed like that he didn't have to worry about walking around displaying the items he wore. The fact that he didn't have to be seen with a dog collar on his neck brought him a huge sense of relief. Next up are the molars. Jinwoo summoned the store next. He sold the Japtum Cerberus Molar and got 150,000 gold for each. He sold all 3 off right away. Th. Most uptod /it velze republished on n0 velge and c/o/m. Soon, for 150,000 gold entered his hands. Current gold, 562,362. What kind of Japtum is this expensive? It was a rather nice baseline to judge the overall difficulty of this dungeon. In other words, the difficulty of clearing the demon's castle would be incredibly high. However, it wasn't all necessarily bad news. He only hunted a single monster, yet he got to earn over 4 times the amount of gold compared to the whole day spent inside the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon. If he saved up gold in this fashion, it wouldn't be too far from now when he'd get to purchase all those items that cost millions upon millions in the store. That is, as long as I get to clear this dungeon. Jinwoo stared up at the burning tower. Crackle. Pop. The very top of the structure was completely shrouded in some kind of blurry fog. He had to actually enter the tower if he wanted to see what was going on inside. But Jinwoo shook his head. Now's not the time. He only barely managed to hunt down a single sentry standing guard by the door, even with his title buffing him up and resorting to using up the quest reward too. He couldn't even guess just what kind of danger would be waiting for him beyond that gate. So, now was the time for him to back off. Still, he was certain of one thing. Just as the explanation said, this key to the demon's castle was indeed something he wanted. The name Blessed Random Box wasn't wrong. Leveling up quickly, valuable items, and plenty of gold too. This place had it all, and one day, he'd get to claim them all as his. Only that, today wasn't that day. Although he was slightly unwilling, he stored the gray key inside his inventory. It'll return. Definitely very soon. Jinwoo smiled as he turned around to leave. Part 3. Coincidence. A few days went by without any incident. Yu Jinho called Jinwoo almost daily and reported on the progress. From the day after their meeting, he had called Jinwoo precisely 3 times. Hyungnim, it's me, Yu Jinho. Details only. Yes, Hyungnim. It seemed that the job of finding other teammates was going rather smoothly. Yu Jinho repeatedly emphasized that the formation of the raid team would end soon, and that Jinwoo should wait just a little while longer. Looks like he's really scared of me dropping out, huh? However, Jinwoo couldn't just wait and do nothing while waiting for the team to form. So he accessed the website for hunters today as well. He asked around all the time for the past few days, but no freelancer-run raid teams wanted to work together with an E-rank hunter. He simply had gotten lucky on that day. Sure, Hwang Dong-suk had been scheming some nefarious things, but in any case, Jinwoo still ended up being a part of a raid team, didn't he? Thanks to that, I made lots of money, my levels went up, and even got me a new skill too. Should he feel grateful to Hwang Dong-suk in that case? Jinwoo let off a smirk. Well, as he was now, he wouldn't mind meeting up with other selfish hunters acting like geckos at the moment. No raid teams wanted him, the association wasn't calling him, and keys to instant dungeons didn't want to show up too. Basically, he was doing nothing but suck on his fingers for the past couple of days. SFX for an empty stomach rumbling. Is it time to eat already? Jinwoo felt hungry as he spent hours roaming the online job postings, so he headed to the kitchen. But when he opened the fridge's door, it was completely empty inside. This was the inevitable result of not going shopping for the past few days. His excuse being that his mind had been preoccupied with several urgent matters until now. Should I go shopping then? Jinwoo yawned out slightly and closed the fridge's door. Asterisk. One of the few advantages the apartment he was living in had was its close proximity to a large supermarket. Wearing simple, easy-to-move clothes, Jinwoo left his home. A 10-minute walk later, he had arrived at his destination already. As soon as he stepped in through the door, the wide-open expanse of the supermarket's interior entered his view. Maybe because there wasn't some sort of promotion going on, it was quieter than usual in the aisles. Jinwoo picked up a basket and slowly walked around. Ever since his mother was confined to the hospital, Jinwoo had been acting as the head of the family, and now he grew to be more or less familiar with chores of the household, such as shopping for groceries. There isn't anything catching my eyes today, though. While he was deeply staring at the displayed produce, trying to think about what to prepare for dinner. Pardon me, young man. I see that you're feeling much better now. A rather friendly voice came from behind him, and Jinwoo turned around to look who it was. Who was he? Because of his high perception stat, he knew that there was a hunter nearby. But this was a supermarket where lots of people came and went, and hunters also had to go shopping too, so he didn't dwell on the matter for long. However, he didn't expect that hunter to engage him in conversation. Not only that, a hunter he actually knew too. Mr. Song. Ah, Juicy? Jinwoo's expression brightened in an instant. Mr. Song Cheol looked at Song Jinwoo with an expression half in disbelief and the other half in delight. I did hear the news that you were fine, but I still can't believe it, even after running into you like this. Song Cheol formed a deeply moved expression next. Jinwoo felt kind of embarrassed by the emotional eyes of Song Cheol and sheepishly scratched the side of his temple. Meanwhile, Song Cheol continued on. I should have gone to visit you at the hospital, but for some reason, the folks at the association all tightly shut their mouths, and I couldn't hear any concrete information on you until now. Did you know that Miss Ju Hui is also anxiously waiting for your news? Miss Ju Hui? Really? That's right. She said that she'd give up being a hunter, but still, she stopped by at last week's raid location just to look for you. Last week, after listening to Mr. Song's story, it turned out that, rather coincidentally, there was a raid organized by the association on the very same day he entered Huang Dong-suk's team. That was why there hadn't been any word from the association until now. It was not that there hadn't been any calls from the association, but more like he missed it when it did come. A small mystery got resolved pretty easily, just like that. Song Cheol studied Song Jinwoo's appearance here and there, still mystified by what he was seeing. By the way, was Mr. Song this tall before? And with his bad leg and all, too. Song Cheol's gaze naturally headed lower. And then, his eyes grew extra wide in shock. Your leg. Jinwoo calmly made his reply. When I came to, my leg had been all healed up. Even I'm not sure what happened to me. Song Cheol nodded his head. Ever since Gates appeared for the first time 10 years ago, many illogical things continued to transpire to this day. The people called hunters who had awakened their abilities were a prime example of this. A healer ranked S could reputedly heal a person who was ripped to shreds back to normal, as long as the victim was still alive. What if a high-ranking healer healed Jinwoo's injuries while he was unconscious? If that was the case, then his severed leg being reattached didn't even qualify as a miracle. It'd do no good to see a young man, such as yourself, become disabled like that. What a relief this is. What a relief. Song Cheol lightly patted his chest as if a big weight of his had been lifted off his shoulders now. .ra lat ch/p/ters on n/v/l I'd c//m. It was then Jinwoo's gaze drifted towards Song Cheol's left arm. The older man's sleeve was empty. Song Cheol chuckled and massaged his left shoulder. Don't you worry about it. A hunter getting injured during a raid is a normal occurrence, after all. No, I've been lucky for not running into an accident until then. Song Cheol spoke as if it wasn't much to fret over, but the gazes of other people walking by weren't like that. Oh my gosh, what a regrettable thing that. Did a monster do that? Andy's out shopping, and students walking by whisper to each other after spotting Song Cheol's empty sleeve. Hell, there was even this one guy who quite openly stared on as well, while looking rather mystified and all. Jinwoo quickly spoke up. Should we go somewhere else? There were far too many people walking by here, right by the butchery aisle. Song Cheol had been feeling uncomfortable by all the stares, so he nodded his head quickly. He still had few more things to say to Jinwoo, too. That would be a good idea. The two of them hurriedly walked away in order to find a quiet spot to chat. But as they walked, Song Cheol sensed that something was rather odd here. The sound of Mr. Song's steps are. Jinwoo's steps were just too soft. The youth was walking right beside Song Cheol, yet it was hard to detect his presence. Why was that? The older man even felt that, were they to start fighting here, he'd be unable to even touch a hair on Jinwoo's body. Even though he was rank C, and Jinwoo was rank D. Just what am I even thinking about? Song Cheol shook his head. That wasn't the important thing right now. There was something he badly wanted to say to Mr. Song. No, he simply had to say it. Song Cheol came to a stop where it was quiet and isolated. Jinwoo also stopped there. Song Cheol turned to look at Jinwoo, and before the youth could stop him, bowed his head 90 degrees. Mr. Song, thank you. When a man who was old enough to be his dad lowered his head like that, Jinwoo couldn't help but feel solemn as well. Jinwoo, of course, tried to dissuade Song Cheol, but the older man didn't listen and instead carried on with what he wanted to say. If you say 11 people died because of me, then you were responsible for saving 6 lives that day. My share of the blame in that matter is the biggest, so on the behalf of all the hunters who were there, let me say thank you. Song Cheol meant every word he spoke, and Jinwoo could feel the older man's sincerity as well. The situation had become somewhat awkward, but it didn't feel so bad. How should he go about describing it? He was feeling proud. Of course, that didn't mean he should let an elder remain in that bowing position. Juicy. Thanks, so please stand back up. Please. Just as Jin Woo tried to persuade Song Chi-yeol to stand up straight, the latter's phone went off. Song Chi-yeol asked for Jin Woo's understanding and pulled out the smartphone tucked inside his inner pocket. Hello. Song Chi-yeol's face gradually hardened as he answered the call. I understand. He'll be there soon. Song Chi-yeol ended the call and spoke to Jin Woo next. Looks like I need to get going. He was implying that there was a private matter he had to attend to. However, Jin Woo was able to listen in on the contents of the conversation. His hearing had been improved by a great deal after his perception stat rose up dramatically. That call just now was from the association, asking for cooperation in clearing a gate nearby. Song Chi-yeol was actually hiding the truth, because he was worried that Jin Woo would want to tag along, that Jin Woo might want to participate in the raid, even though it hadn't been long since his discharge from the hospital. Jin Woo asked the older man. That was from the association, yes? Song Chi-yeol hesitated slightly before making his reply. That did you hear everything? When an association formed a raid team, it summoned every hunter affiliated with the organization who lived in the vicinity. If Song Chi-yeol received the call, that meant Jin Woo's house had been called as well. It was the order to mobilize, the one Jin Woo had been waiting for. Jin Woo cut to the chase. He'll go with you. But you, Mr. Song. A look of uncertainty floated up on Song Chi-yeol's face as he stared at Jin Woo. The two men arrived at the meeting place. The gate had formed in the middle of the road, pretty close to residential areas, so the police officers called in to control the access to the location. However, there were almost no onlookers present here, to begin with. The majority of gates the association took on were those dangerous ones that had been left alone for too long after their initial discovery. Besides, even if one were to stick around a gate, one would still not get to see how hunters fought. Anyway, it was only a couple of curious, naughty kids loitering around who got chased away by the officers every now and then. With a thud, the door to the taxi was closed shut. Jin Woo and Song Chi-yeol had exited from the taxi and made their way towards the location where the other hunters had been gathered, only for the cops to stop them. Please show me your IDs. Song Chi-yeol pulled out his wallet and displayed his license. I'm Song Chi-yeol, a rank C hunter. This is my colleague, Song Jin Woo. The cops compared the photo on the license to Song Chi-yeol's face before returning it and parted ways. Sorry for the inconvenience, hunters. Keep up the good work. Song Chi-yeol performed a slight nod to the policeman and continued on. Jin Woo followed right behind him. The employee from the association was waiting in front of the gate. It was a young woman wearing a round-rimmed pair of glasses. She approached the two men after spotting them from a distance. Song Chi-yeol Hunternim. How did you get here? Song Jin Woo Hunternim. You weren't answering your phone until now. Song Chi-yeol replied instead. We were in the same location and came here together after you guys called me. Is that so? I thought that Song Hin Woo Hunternim was avoiding answering our calls again. The association employee chuckled and cracked a joke. Well, that indeed had been true in the past. A long time ago, Jin Woo got injured badly during a raid, and he grew fearful of going to dungeons, which led to him switching off his phone for a while. In the end, he had to return to raiding dungeons, since not answering the call 3 times in a row meant he'd be chased out from the association. Recalling his past, Jin Woo could only smile in bitterness. All right, other hunters are waiting for you. Why don't you two head over there and greet them? There were other hunters who had arrived earlier where the association employee was pointing at. Well, there were only 2 other hunters there, however. The number of those willing to come had decreased sharply after that huge incident. Jin Woo heard from Song Chi-yeol on their way here that, besides those who died, many other hunters decided to quit this life from the shock of that underground temple incident. One of them happens to be Miss Ju Hui. Jin Woo took a look around, but he couldn't see her. When Jin Woo and Song Chi-yeol approached closer, the 2 hunters awkwardly averted their gazes. Jin Woo narrowed his eyes. But of course, these 2 happened to be Kim Sang-sik, who ran off trying to save only himself, and the other male hunter who had discarded the injured Jin Woo. Of course, they would find it rather awkward to face him. Excuse me, Mr. Song. Kim Sang-sik was thinking of at least greeting the youth, but when he was subjected to Jin Woo's cold glare, he eventually shifted his gaze away. Kim Sang-sik shut his mouth, studied the mood for a bit, before shuffling further away from there. He stopped at a bit of distance away and sneaked a glance at Jin-woo, before he tilted his head in confusion. Is he really the Song Jin-woo that I know? I mean, his eyes are as fierce as a monster, man. Like a real monster. Kim Sang-sik shuddered deeply. As he thought, his arm was covered in goosebumps. Jin-woo withdrew his glare, filled with hostilities. Thankfully, quite unlike you, Jin-ho, Kim Sang-sik was quick on the uptake. After locking eyes once, he didn't even try to come near Jin-woo's vicinity. He sincerely hoped that this arrangement would remain for the rest of the raid. Mr. Song Cheol, standing next to Jin-woo, shifted his gaze in a direction and smiled gently. There she is. Jin-woo also turned his head in the direction Song Cheol was looking at. But before he had the chance to completely turn around to look, Mr. Jin-woo, something rather soft, suddenly hugged him tightly. Miss Ju-hui? While Jin-woo was getting flustered, Ju-hui was too busy making sure he was fine with a tearful face. Are you all right? You're not hurt anywhere, right? Your leg. Mr. Jin-woo, how come your leg is? Ju-hui's eyes went extra round as she alternated her gaze between his face and his leg. There's a bit of difference in how extreme it was, but nevertheless, her reaction was more or less the same with Song Cheol's. Oh, that. Just as Jin-woo was about to reply. How steamy, It's steamy, I say. Both the gazes of Jin-woo and Ju-hui shifted over in the direction of that voice. From afar, an unknown man was whistling loudly at them. More importantly, though, he was wearing the blue-colored prison overall. Is there a film shoot going on around nearby, or something? While Jin-woo was tilting his head in confusion, a man wearing a business suit climbed down from the front seat of a certain minivan. He then threw out a measured warning at the prison overall guy. Shut your mouth. The prison overall guy pretended to not know anything by staring at the distance. However, he quickly threw an oily wink at Ju-hui when the business suit looked back inside the van. Immediately, Jin-woo's expression crumpled. Two more people climbed out of the van right away. Both of them were men. And particularly worthy of note was the fact that they all wore prison overalls and had been cuffed as well. The business suit led the three prison overalls towards the association's employee, and she welcomed him with a bright expression. "You've finally arrived. Please forgive us for our tardiness. There was traffic on the road." The business suit then proceeded to sign on each of the documents the association employee presented to him. In the meantime, the employee called for the hunters to gather around. These folks are the replacement convicts who will participate in the raid alongside you, hunters. And so, the expressions of the hunters hardened considerably. Kim Sang-sik was the first to step forward. What? Replacement convicts? Are you telling us to go on a raid along with a bunch of criminals? Hunters who had committed crimes had two choices. Either spend their allotted time behind the bars, or cooperate with the association and reduce their sentences. Most chose the latter option, and they were referred to as the replacement convicts. The association employee repeatedly lowered her head. I'm really sorry about this. It's only because the number of hunters active in our district has declined so much that the association has no choice but to do this. However, they will be accompanied by a hunter from the monitoring division, so you don't have to worry too much. Kim Sang-sik asked, still full of suspicion. A hunter from the monitoring division, you say?